You know, he's come back to me twice, which has honestly given me like a complex, because now I never believe it. I'm like, sure, you took his head again. Hey guys, it's Sarah. Welcome back to another video here on my channel. Hope you guys are doing well. I feel like I'm like wildly nervous to start this video. I've been standing here like rearranging my shelves and just like I don't know, I'm feeling some type of way. Do you guys remember like when Mike's Mike started all of this? Because really that's why I'm here. Like, he is the reason I'm here today in front of this camera talking to you. He said something like, if I'm gonna show myself on the internet, this is what we're gonna be talking about. And honest to God, that's this video for me. If I'm gonna talk to you guys about what's important to me, that's this video right here. So I think that's why I'm nervous. Hey, what's up? I'm Sarah from The Next Day. I was so nervous that I didn't even actually tell you what we were going to be covering in this video. Welcome. I do a lot of stuff about the Vampire Diaries over here. We've kind of been in this since the channel started. Today, we're looking at my favorite group of side characters, the Gemini Coven. Couldn't name the video the Gemini Coven, Cult or Coven, so, you know, we're going to zone in on the Parkers because those are my babies. But we're going to talk about everybody. We're going into the Coven itself, we're going into the Heretics, we're going into the Parkers, we're going into the Saltzman twins. Anything Gemini, it will be in this video. We're just going to have a multiple hour long yap session. Like, that's all we're going to do. These guys are just such a special interest of mine. Like, if you want to talk hyperfixations, look no further. I have a stupid amount of like headcanons and like personal thoughts on the family, but also like the Coven in general. So like I said, I might misspeak. If I do, and I say something and you're like, actually, just say it down below. It's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. And I'm gonna try to be so careful, but like, I'm human. So don't be mean. My script is currently, it's sitting right here, over here. It's currently 28 pages long. And I stopped myself from working on it. I was like, you just need to start recording. You're gonna think of more things to say. Trust and believe this is gonna take me more than one day to film. This is gonna take me several days to edit. I'm starting this on, a Monday, a certain Monday in January is when I'm starting this. So that's what I'm doing today to keep myself happy. For anybody that clicked on this video like, who are these people? By the end of it, literally all of them, okay? Know that in your heart. And you know, somebody, I'm not gonna say who, is the one to most of them. It's touchy, and I get that, and I'm not gonna try to make it funny, but also sometimes it's funny. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about fictional witches from a fictional coven, from a fictional TV world, because they weren't in the books, I don't think. So yeah, TV world, okay? And let's just remember that. Let's just remember that and have fun, okay? Okay, considering that the Parker family is just one of like countless families inside the larger Gemini Coven, I feel like we really need to just start there. Like, let's just unpack what we know about the Coven lore. And honestly, considering that it comes up in multiple shows, you would think we would know more, right? But this is a show about vampires, and so they love nothing more than like dropping just delicious bits of lore, especially about the witches, and then being like, oh, that's all you get though. Fill in the blanks yourself. We're gonna reference it multiple times. We're never gonna give you an answer. But I will take those scraps every day and I will compile them in my little hidey hole and I will put them together myself and come to my own conclusions, okay? Because that must have been what you wanted me to do, or you would have given me the full information. If you can hear that sound, I think my neighbors upstairs are vacuuming currently. They stopped. So the Geminis have been arguably like one of, if not the largest coven on the Pacific Northwest, okay? They're over there. Family home for the Parkers is in Portland, which is interesting because then you got the Bennetts on the East Coast, and I think that's fun. So while we see other members of the coven, like I mentioned, the Parkers are really the only ones that we like zero in on and like get to know fully, but there's like a distinct culty vibe to the whole thing, okay? It all feels fishy. If nothing else, the insistence of like coven over family that the Parkers have had drilled into them seemingly since freaking birth, like they all suffer from it one way or another. And I will say that the other covens we meet do have a certain like intensity when it comes to like holding on to power. The Gemini's just kind of above and beyond that though. Like, think about when Abby called in those witches to help Bonnie, right? They were going to help her and they knew Abby, but they didn't know Bonnie really. They just knew like, this is a Bennett in trouble and we're gonna do whatever we can to help her. They were very selfless in that way. And the only reason why they turned on her was because they realized like, oh, you are a danger to yourself and others. We must stop you. We're so sorry. This has to be done. The Gemini are like, prison world. Didn't even tell you what a prison world was. Okay, so that's this fun little thing that they created. They're like these intricate little devices that quite literally hold like a world inside of them, like a little parallel dimension pocket world inside the little device. They're looped on a certain day. So like for Kai, it's May 10th, 1994. The Heretics, it's October 31st, 1903. And theoretically there are more, right? We don't know for sure. That's never like confirmed nor denied. Kai says prison worlds, and Rick is like, worlds as in plural, and then we never go farther than that. I don't think there's just two. That seems kind of silly. I feel like there must be more than that. And they're empty, right? They're like a little dimension world of a certain day that just loops over and over again, perfectly like crafted. So like the whole world is there. You can do whatever you want, but you're alone. So like Kai is alone in his for 18 years. The Heretics and Lily are together as a group of 7, but they are alone. There's nothing else in the world. As far as theirs goes, there is still blood for them to drink. So like they're fine for a while and then they get kind of like locked in because of the excessive snow and everything. And so they end up like desiccating. We'll get into that, but they have what they need to survive, right? I don't know how we're supposed to feel about the magic inside Kai's, right? Because we know that Joe's knife is there. We know the Ketsia rock is there. So in theory, there must be more magical artifacts that he could like track down and like look for and kind of collect and absorb when he needs. But we never talk about that. Now, why does that matter at all? Because when Damon and Bonnie are in there with him, he's hiding from them for like at least a few months, right? Like there's a stretch of time where they're all in there together and they don't know he's in there, but he knows about them and he's watching them for an extended period of time. Damon is a vampire. So he should be able to hear his heartbeat. He should be able to hear him breathing. He should definitely be able to hear him munching on stuff because we know our boy snacks. Like there's no way for him to be that quiet unless he is cloaking himself. And if he's cloaking himself, where's he getting that magic from? But again, that's a plot hole that they don't want us to look at too hard, but I can't help myself. Like, what do you mean you hid from Damon for months? How to explain? And in theory, these prison worlds could be used to hold anybody that the coven didn't like, any threat that needed to be taken care of. It seems like canonically they only ever use them to get rid of siphons though. So, and then the way they work, it's obviously a Gemini spell, right? So it's a Gemini artifact, it's a Gemini spell that's created to make the world, and then they're bound by blood from another bloodline. And again, canonically, it seems like that's always a Bennett. So Sheila is the one that binds Kai's. Yeah, like Grams herself. I know, crazy lore. We don't know who the Bennett was that did the 1903 one. And then obviously, you know, the 2018 one Bonnie makes. So we know canonically that they're one of the covens that practices the old holidays too, which I think is really fun. I wish we saw it a little bit more in the Parkers. We don't. Like, even the fact that Kai is like, my favorite holiday is Thanksgiving. It's like, your favorite holiday should probably be Lunasa. Samhain, although maybe the spirits coming back for one night would kind of freak him out a little bit. It's easy to imagine these guys being really old because everything that we know about them kind of confirms that they're steeped in tradition, and they have all these like old world or like old for the coven belief systems that they still follow in modern day. So they feel ancient in a way that some of the like more modern covens that we see don't. They just seem to be like really dead set on like legacy and keeping power moving through the coven and always like expanding and getting more powerful. And I think like the baby incubator spell that they seem to have locked and loaded in case of emergencies, it really speaks to like the lengths they're willing to go to like preserve the coven even after somebody like Kai goes scorched earth. Like, they know they're gonna be fine even if all of them are taken out. And that just screams culty to me. Like, it feels a little Doomsday Prepper-esque, you know? Like, how many backup plans do you need? Why are there so many threats to the coven that you're this worried about it? Maybe that should be, you should be checking out that, okay? They also have this thing unique to them where like all of the major spells are tied to the coven leader. So like the prison worlds themselves tied to the coven leader. So if anything happens to the coven leader, all that magic unravels and all those spells come apart. I'm sorry, but there had to be a better way of doing that. And also, it doesn't really make sense because another thing they love to do is retcon the lore that they're making up and telling us as we go along. I'm just watching the show. Y'all wrote this and still put in all these inconsistencies, right? Because when Kai dies at the Red Wedding, he tells Bonnie, I'm so sorry I can't take the Sleeping Beauty spell off of you and Elena because when I died, it made it permanent. He could just be lying because later on, like, she does unravel the spell and wake Elena up, right? But I don't think he was supposed to be. Like, I think he thought he was telling her the truth. So he was leader at the time of his death. So does that mean that you're actually saying only the Gemini specific spells unravel when the leader dies, and regular everyday witches, when they die, their spells don't unravel? Doesn't it feel like maybe that should be the reverse? Do you hear what I'm saying? Doesn't it feel like maybe the all-powerful coven, when it goes down, all of that magic should lock into place and you should be stuck with it forever, right? But then a regular witch, when they do something and they die, like, it would unravel. Hey, it's future me again. I forgot to tell you their obsession with cloaking spells and like cloaking magic. So not only are they just like stupidly secretive about like their magic and how it works and the coven itself, and like they don't like outsiders trying to get in. They're very like culty and they don't want you to peek behind the curtain and see what's going on, you know, because they're killing their children. So Joe tells us sort of offhandedly at one point, like, oh yeah, cloaking spells are one of the first things they teach you as a young Gemini. And let me tell you, it tracks, because if any one of them gets the tiniest whiff of like inconvenience or danger, they're gone. Invisique, bitch, we're out of here. Let me circle back, because not only do they link the spells to the leader, they link everybody's lives in the coven to the leader. So if that person goes down, whole coven implodes with them. It also means that whoever is currently leader can draw on the rest of the coven for extra power at will. But Sarah, how do they pick this person to lead them when it seems like such a precarious, awful position to be in? I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about the merge. So the Gemini Coven leader is determined by a set of twins who've reached age 22, competing in the merge ritual against each other. They essentially weigh their magic, and then the stronger twin absorbs the other one. So they're taking like their magic, their life, aspects of their personality into themselves and literally like merging into one soul. We are told multiple times that that's how the merge works, right? Like you are becoming a new person, you and your sibling coming together, new being. Do they retcon that? Yeah, bestie, they do, in the worst way imaginable. But you know what? That's what it was supposed to be. And that's what we had for like a glorious 4 to 5 episodes. We're gonna unpack that later though. Now, why is the merge happening, right? Because when I first watched the show, I was like, that seems like a crazy choice that you guys have made. Like, what do you mean? You take 2 of your kids and you make them compete to the death. You raise them knowing they're gonna compete to the death, and that hasn't led to any issues in the past. That everybody's cool with that? Are you sure? What are you talking about? We end up finding out all the way in Legacies, confirmation that like, it's a curse, right? Like it's not fun. Nobody's enjoying that they're doing this. It's very culty where they're like, don't worry guys, it's an honor. It's an honor for you to compete to the death and kill your sibling and then lead us for an undetermined amount of time until the next set of twins is ready to compete to the death. That's how they talk about it. They don't want anybody to be freaking out about it, but like, it's a curse. It's a straight up curse. And we find out later on. But we never get an explanation. They never lay it out for us as to like, this is where the curse started. This is why it started. This is why Gemini twins are destined to do this to each other. Nobody's gonna tell us that, so we just have to fill in those blanks ourselves. It's really interesting to see the way that those beliefs kind of shake out in the kids, right? Because Kai and Luke, to an extent, like really buy into like, the merge is an honor, the merge is what we're supposed to do, it's our destiny, we were always supposed to do this. Where Joe and Liv are like, it's really screwed up. Don't you think it's really screwed up? And like, they're gonna die, right? They're the weaker siblings. Like they're the ones that aren't gonna win. So of course they're more upset about it. but it's interesting, like the dynamics and like who's okay with it and who's not. One of my absolute favorite fan theories out there is that Silas, this man, is our OG like Gemini witch, right? Like he would be the one that his descendants would then become Geminis, because Ketsia is our OG Bennett, and he betrayed her, right? And ended up with Amara, and everything got funky. So it would not be a stretch to be like she put a curse on anybody from his line moving forward. The merge itself is never confirmed to be like dark magic or expression on the show, and yet both times we see it done, it is absolutely expression. What are you talking about? This is Bonnie doing expression, right? You see those veins? You see the darkness moving through her? Here's the boys. Yeah. And I would argue that like merging souls into one body and killing your own kin would maybe not be something that the spirits would enjoy. Maybe they would think that that doesn't go with the natural order of things. Maybe they would say, actually, we split you in the womb on purpose and you were supposed to stay separate. Why are you trying to conjoin again? And that's honestly, for me, enough, like outside of like the Silas Ketsia theory, just the fact that its expression, clearly its expression, is enough for me to be like, maybe that's why the spirits are upset. Like maybe y'all just did it one time and knew it was expression and you shouldn't be messing with it, but you did it anyway. And so the spirits were like, now you have to do this forever. I wish we knew how they got locked into that cycle, because it is fascinating to kind of think about all the different ways that it could have come about. But like I said, like we never get confirmation. You're never gonna know. We go into Legacies thinking that Josie and Lizzie Saltzman aren't gonna have to do the merge. They were sort of like loophole babies because they weren't born yet when Kai killed everybody. Ooh, spoilers. I'm gonna go on record real quick and just say that that makes no sense to me, and it never has, and it probably never will. We can argue about it. I'm still gonna be like, no, babe, it doesn't make any sense. They were Gemini babies. There was Gemini magic in them that Kai could feel. That's how he knew they were in Joe's stomach, which means that when the coven went down, they should have gone down with everybody else. You know who shouldn't have died? Miss Ma'am right here, right? Had she not been through the spine, she should have been good to go because she didn't have any. Okay. Let me calm down. We're gonna talk about that in the Saltzman twin section. Back on track, the merge. Let's talk about the visual differences in the merge for a minute, because the one with the boys, oh, it's one of my favorite scenes. It's so good. I love the effects on them, especially the way their eyes glaze over and they like film with white, but they're like locked on each other still. There's this specific moment where you can like see Luke lose, because all of a sudden he starts moving like he's being controlled by Kai, and it's just, like you can like see where he stops saying the words because he wants to say them and is just being puppeted, and it's so good. But yeah, I love the veins. I love the spinning camera. I love the wind. I love the long shot when they fall out and pass out across from each other. I love Joe waking up and screaming over Luke doing it. Like the visual of her holding him while he's dying in her arms. It's just so good. It's so good. The whole thing, whole scene, great. Even the OG fake merge with Kai and Joe out in the woods, okay? They're straight up just out in the woods behind the Parker family home. And it is so unsettling and so creepy. And another thing about the OG merge that I personally believe that is never confirmed nor denied, but I think contextually it makes a lot of sense, and that's why to me it might as well be canon. I think May 9th is the twins' birthdays, and I think that's the day they were going to merge. And then when they were told like, actually, no, we're not doing that. You two don't have to worry about it. We're gonna let Lucas and Olivia do it. That was when Kai was like, oh, hold on, I need to go get my bat. My reasoning for this is that young Joe is wearing white, and Kai has a white shirt on under his red shirt that he's wearing in that scene. He's also wearing khakis instead of like his normal darker colored clothing. And then later on, when we see Liv kind of dealing with Luke being dead, she's holding a white dress, and she says, this is the dress I was gonna merge with Luke in, like this is the dress I would have died in. And then even later, Lizzie is wearing white in the merge with Josie. Josie's dark Josie at the time, so she's emo as hell in all black, but Lizzie's wearing white. So contextually, costume designer wise, I'm like, I feel like they were subtly telling us that, and even if they weren't, I'm gonna go with it. So in my opinion, the twins' birthday's May 9th. I think that tracks. I think that makes perfect sense. You can't tell me these two aren't Tauruses. Just, you'll never, you can pry that headcanon out of my cold, dead hands, babe. And then you have this three-ring circus. Like, what are we doing? A wrestling ring? I had to circle back to this because I was so annoyed the first time we were talking about it that I didn't even say anything or explain why it looks this way. It's just silly. Like, Legacies itself is very camp in a way that like TVD and the originals, sometimes they are, right? Sometimes those shows are really silly. Legacies is like cracked out. It's so camp all the time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's really fun, and other times you're doing the merge in a wrestling ring and I want to be 5 miles from here. Like, what is this? This is technically not real. Also, like, they're fake merging to like trick Dark Josie and like have Hope, you know, make her better and stuff. I don't know, maybe it adds to the atmosphere of it being fake, but for me, I'm just like, in comparison to this over here, good Lord, get this off my screen. These are witches in the TVD world that are born without magic of their own, so they can't self-generate magic, right? They're still witches because they cannot be compelled. So there is some innate thing going on in their body that marks them as a witch. That doesn't matter to literally anybody else, right? As far as all the other witches are concerned, they are not real witches and they are broken, awful, terrible things that need to be stopped at all costs. Because they can only take magic. So they can drain it from objects, they can drain it from other witches, they can take it from werewolves and vampires, anything magical. Which in my opinion makes them painfully cool. Like, what do you mean you can't be poisoned by werewolf venom? What do you mean you can drain a vampire to desiccation? Are you joking? Just popping in to say that like Nora confirms this, right? Like Nora looks us in the eyes and is like, I just don't understand why we're hiding here pretending like we're not literally the strongest creatures on the planet. I'm like, thank you for saying it out loud. Thank you. To me, it's always felt like they made truly uncontrollable, scarily powerful creatures and then sort of had to frantically walk it back because they were like, oh, like nobody can beat them. And it's like, that's why they're so scary. That's why they're so dangerous. And it's one of the reasons why later on, like in season 8, when we find out there are like anti-siphon spells, I'm like, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. Where did those come from? Like, such a stupid loophole to lock Kai up in those chains in that chair and be like, he just can't drain them now. Suddenly. We didn't know this was a thing before, but now he just can't drain them. Like, it's so dumb. I'm like, just own the fact that he's overpowered. Just own the fact that they're really hard to control. Sometimes the loopholes really freaking get on my nerves, and this is like, oh my god. Siphons are never referenced as being from other covens. Like, they're literally just Geminis. It's really easy to be like, that's got to be part of the curse, right? Like, if you're saying they're not normal, why the hell are they popping up in Gemini bloodlines throughout the centuries? But again, we don't know why. Like, it's never spelled out. Is it a way for like the spirits to try to force them to be kinder? Because it does not work, spoiler. Or is it a way to like balance out the power that the coven has? Or like rig the merge so like a certain sibling's gonna win every once in a while? I don't know, because also we don't know how many there are that aren't Kai. There's a group that we're going to talk about in a minute, right? From like pre-1900. Then there's Kai in 1994. And then there's the Saltzman twins. There's gotta be more in between there, right? Like, it can't just be, why would it be so spread out? But we don't know for sure. This is one of the things that I explored in my Bankai book, because the fact that there's not a point to it is crazy. I'm like, they should have just buttoned that for us one way or another and told us exactly why they exist. Because what do you mean? Why? I need an answer, and it keeps me up at night in terms of TVD lore. Like, magic always wants a balance, right? It comes at a price, that kind of thing. The spirits aren't evil. Like, they take care of the witches, right? And siphons are witches. I just mentioned that to you. They can't be compelled. Inherently, they are witches, just like, you know, regular witches. I can't see the spirits being like, and we're dropping you into the family so you can be abused for years. Why would they do that? Like, there's gotta be something else going on there, but it's never touched on. Nobody ever explains it to us to be like, this is why we created them. This is why they're here. And it's really frustrating because it leaves you just being like, wow. I've been saying it, but let me just confirm for you now. Siphons are super hated in the witch world, right? Like, I feel like they have the same level of disdain for siphons that they have for like vampires. I mean, they like werewolves. We get that like hammered home in the originals, but like witches hate vampires, right? They also freaking hate siphons. You see a siphon, kill it on sight, burn it with fire. They don't want anything to do with them. I find it so interesting to think about like where that stems from, and to me it like must tie back to the curse, because otherwise why would they be so scared of them? Why would they hate them so much? Like, it goes past just like disliking their power. They fundamentally are like, you guys are not witches. Like, you guys are screwed up abominations that need to be destroyed, essentially. And I'm like, how do you get there? Like, what happened to make you view them that way? Because I feel like it had to even be pre the heretics, right? Like, I don't even think that locking them up with Lily and throwing them away and being like, they killed so many people in Europe, like, I don't even think that's it. Like, I think it's before that, and we just don't even know where it started. But it is so interesting to think about the fact that like so much of like what's wrong with them, so much of the like emotional instability and like these symptoms that they all share, because they're not all sociopaths, right? Like, Kai is a sociopath, and in my opinion that's like trauma based in him, and then him being a siphon like kind of compounds it, and so there's all of that going on over here where he is. These guys aren't all sociopathic. That's not just like a trait that comes along with being a siphon, right? That's like his thing over here. It's separate from what they've got going on. But I do think there's a level of like emotional instability that comes from them not having magic, and then that sort of manifests in different ways through them. Like, Kai equates it to feeling like an addict when he was a kid, where he's like, you know, Jo was perfect and she could do whatever she wanted whenever she wanted, and then I'm over here on fire trying to find more magic and no one will give it to me, and I'm miserable and I feel bad all the time. That has to do things to them mentally. And I just think like the fact that the coven then seems to be like, oh well, look at you being bad, and it's like, if they're better when they have magic, why aren't we just finding a way to give it to them? Like, that will never make sense to me, because you're just perpetuating the cycle and then going, why is the cycle perpetuating itself? You're doing it, babe. Need you to understand that, okay? And I don't think you do. Let me bring you back to the first time I watched the show, right? It's summer of 2016. I've been binging this like no tomorrow. I'm on the edge of my seat anytime they give me just a drop of witch lore, right? And like I said, I'm compiling it into my little file in my mind, because I knew even then one day I'm gonna write fan fiction about this. So when we found out that Kai was a witch who couldn't generate his own magic, I was instantly like, oh dear God, you must be in so much pain. And why did I think that? I'm so glad you asked. The whole show, up until this point, 5 seasons of witch lore, it has been hammered home to us that witches who don't have magic or who have something go wrong with their magic are in pain. They suffer from depression, they can't focus, like things go wrong internally when their magic is messed up because they're supposed to have it and it's out of balance, and then they get all funky. In the case with Bonnie, she was so unwell when her magic was blocked up that she let herself get drawn into using expression because it felt so good, and Shane was tricking her and manipulating those feelings of like fear over her magic not coming back and like not being able to like control it, and like the witches maybe not being who she should trust, and so he warped her up, and she was so vulnerable that she allowed herself to fall into that with him. Bonnie's a smart girl, okay, and yet she let this little rat man trick her. With Abby Bennett, Bonnie's mom, when she left Bonnie and like deserted the family after dealing with Michael, the spirits were like, you're a terrible mother, and took her magic from her, right? So she wasn't like a traditional magic wielding witch anymore. She was miserable. She was miserable. She was horribly depressed, so unwell. The only thing she had going for her was her garden, because she had like a connection to nature still. And then when Damon turns her and that connection is like entirely stripped away from her, she almost commits multiple times. So as the plot started unfolding for Kai, and we learned like how he grew up and how the Parkers treated him, I was just sitting there like, what the... Nobody gave you like a necklace you could drain, or like a little stone you could keep in your pocket? Like, why didn't somebody just charge your breakfast plate up for you in the morning and let you drain that and go about the day? There's no reason that you had to like take it from your siblings or your parents. You could have just had them give it to you. Witches enchant objects all the freaking time. This doesn't seem like it should be as big of an issue as it is. We know that, right? Like, we saw it with Emily's necklace specifically, but there's multiple moments where like Bonnie feels magic in objects. There's no reason for him to be taking it from one of his siblings or his parents unless that's the only option you're leaving him with. And why are you doing that? And then going, no, don't do it. Like, what are you talking about? And then again, with the knowledge that the lack of magic inside of him is painful, and that pain is slowly cracking his mind and changing him. I just, like, you're quite literally one of the most powerful witches in the world, right? And you can't spare a few drops? Don't piss me off. But no, sure, make him scavenge for it, right? I bet that won't lead to like crushing resentment towards his normal siblings or lifelong insecurities about being born wrong since he's a twin and his sister has magic. So why did he end up the way he did? Who's to say? Or like unbridled hatred towards you for not loving him, even though you made him. Your blood's in him, right? Not the other way around. Imagine my annoyance when we got to season 7 and Valerie had a necklace that she could draw from in times of emergency. I was like, oh, so I was right. I was right. It really is that easy. Okay, cool. You didn't think I'd pass up the opportunity to talk about my favorite wasted potential magic wielding vampire babies, did you? Heretics are quite possibly my favorite creatures in the show. Like, love and adore them more than I can say. They're hybrids, so they're siphon witches that have turned into vampires, and because they have siphon magic and not like traditional magic, they can just siphon the magic from their vampire bodies once they've transitioned, and they keep their magic. Because up until that point, we thought you couldn't be a witch and a vampire. Oh, but you can. So like, that's cool enough, right? But then I mentioned they can't be poisoned by werewolf venom because if they get bitten, they can just siphon the magic out of it. That's sick as hell. These guys right here, they're all Gemini exiles. They were kicked out of the coven over a century ago. Over the course of like a handful of years, maybe a few decades, it's a little confusing because they all seem to be like roughly the same age, at least actor-wise, and they never give us like specifics on how old they were when they turned. So I think there's discrepancies in age here, like personally. Like, I view Nora as being on the younger side. I think Bo is technically the oldest, but Malcolm acts the oldest. So they were kicked out at like varying ages, and then they sort of slowly met up together and ended up with Lily Salvatore, and she acted kind of like their mother. Stay with me. I know, Lily Salvatore, Damon's mom, I know. They got in trouble for A, setting up a small coven of their own, because how dare you find a safe and secure way to practice your evil cursed magic? That has to be stopped. And then B, letting Lily turn them into heretics, meaning that they had an even easier time using said evil cursed magic, but also now they can eat people. And that was a problem. I'm not lying to you. That part was a problem because Lily Salvatore is a ripper. So you got her, and then you got these 6 kids essentially that have been abused their whole lives that are now being told like, yay, we're normal and fun and fine and we all get along and we love each other. Let's eat people with mommy. And they just rampaged through Europe, right? But Oscar's the only other one that is a ripper. So like Lily and Oscar, it's safe to say like the bulk of the body count would be the 2 of them running absolutely wild, while the other 5 were like having fun, right? Julian's also with them. So Julian, Lily, Oscar, absolutely tearing it up. Going to town, I have no doubt about that in my mind. The other 5, I think were probably like, yeah, this is fun. And like having fun with it, but not as bad. Like when Jo talks about them, right? She leaves us with the impression that they're bloodthirsty, just true killer, monster, evil people, right? And then we meet them and they have shocking amounts of control. And like, yes, they do bad things. I'm not saying that they don't, right? But none of them are rippers except for Oscar, because the ripper gene is like just a gene that they have or don't have. The rest of them are evil when they want to be, and then perfectly in control at all other times. When Kai turns at the Red Wedding, the amount of control that that man has, unparalleled. We also only know for sure how Valerie turned, and then she mentions that like the others followed her after that, and I think it's just safe to assume that like they didn't want to leave Valerie, Julian, and Lily because they were all vampires at that point. So like, if we're gonna do it, let's just do it and be a family forever. Why not? But I would say that Julian probably also like coerced / kind of insisted on it because he wanted them to be even stronger than they were. Because he's selfish as hell, like we know that, but also he was being hunted, and so I think it's safe to assume that like the idea of having like really strong bodyguards around him, like that would be great. They're like a little army that he can manipulate. This is canon from some of the TVD writings that I've mentioned. We have like random pages of books that they have like displayed and stuff that you can kind of like zoom in on and look at, and you can find them like on the wiki pages and stuff. But the 1903 prison world is apparently the first one that they ever made, and it was created for the heretics because they were wreaking so much havoc over in Europe, and they were like, yeah, we have to put a stop to this. The loop date for this world is October 31st, 1903, which is just like, y'all couldn't have waited one more day for Samhain. Like, I know damn well the Northern Lights were going to be going for a couple days over New York Harbor, okay? You could have waited and let them go in there on Samhain instead. It's also snowing on the East Coast that night, so they were locked up in a horrific blizzard. Mystic Falls is just buried in snow. But the celestial event is the Northern Lights, like I said, so like at least it was pretty. At least it was pretty. Kai got an eclipse. You're not even supposed to look at those directly, right? But they got the Northern Lights. They were locked up in there for over a century. So it's 1903 when they go in, 2013 when they come out. So a lot has changed. And while they were in there with Lily, they managed to like cure her of her bloodlust, which is a really interesting fact, right? Because like I said, Lily's a ripper. Oscar's also a ripper, so theoretically they helped him too in that time. And they end up making the decision to like desiccate around the dining table downstairs and turn into like little sad vampire witch dolls that Lily is like taking care of, and she has the like dwindling ration of blood because they trusted her to wake them up when it was time to go. Again, speaks to like sibling bond where they made the decision to like let the mom figure stay alive while they did that. It also pushed her to like continue keeping her bloodlust under control because if she drank all the blood and went through the whole ration, she wouldn't be able to wake them up in the end. So she had been like, I'm talking bare minimum drinking blood for decades to keep enough in the vial to make sure she could still wake them up. And this is where things get fishy for me, because Jo makes a point when she tells us what heretics are, that they're like just as bad as Kai, just as deranged, just as awful, but with the bloodlust of vampires thrown in, right? So we're picturing just like raging menaces, awful, horrible. They must be just like the worst of the freaking worst. And then you're telling me that they did that for their mom. Popping in to say that while I do stand by, I think part of what's going on is that they think she's their mom and they view her that way, and obviously they don't want her to be hurt. I do think you could also say that they view her as their leader. And so therefore innately there is something in the six of them that's like, we have to let you live. We can't live above you. You're more important than us, Lily. You have to be the one in charge. We trust you implicitly because that's what we've been trained to do. And we're gonna sit here and desiccate, even though it will be excruciating for who knows how many decades, right? We'll do that for you, Lily, because you're in charge. Cult. And when they get out, they're still not raging menaces, right? Like they're kind of confused and annoyed and like struggling to adjust to the new world and the way that Lily wants them to live. But she reminds them like, you guys helped me and now I'm helping you, and we're gonna adjust and we're gonna be okay. And hopefully if everything works out, my sons will accept you and you can accept them, and then we can be one family and it'll be so nice. Like they have absurd levels of control. Absurd levels of control for people that we're supposed to believe are like off their rocker insane. I'm tired of pretending that these are the bad guys when people like the Salvatore brothers and the Michelsons exist. Like, what are you talking about? Y'all's body count is crazy and you enjoy it. Also, what I find really interesting about the way the heretics like operate inside Mystic Falls, similarly to how I feel about like Bonnie and Kai, right? So much of what happens with them is retaliatory, where like they're trying to follow Lily's orders, and then Caroline blows up the house. So they're like, why don't we attack Matt's graduation? I think we should. Or like, you killed Malcolm. Why don't we kidnap Caroline and keep her strung up in the house? Why wouldn't we do that, Stefan? I think it sounds like a good trade. And then you've got poor Lily running around in between the two groups being like, can we just stop? Like, what if we just stopped? What if we all just sat down for dinner and I'll bring Julian back and we can pretend like he's not a horrible evil monster and we'll just all be a big happy family, please God. Is that too much to ask for? And it's like, Lily, yeah, it is, because your sons can't cool it. Your sons don't know how to cool it. Damon's never been chill a day in his life. And then on top of all of that, right, they do reach a point where they're chill and where things are more relaxed. And when Valerie and Stefan are getting closer and everything starts shaking out with like Lizzie and Josie being inside Caroline, Valerie's the one that gathers the other heretics and is like, can you please help me? Like, these babies need our help. And they're like, yeah, we will do that for you. Even after all of the fighting that's gone down, right? They're still willing to be like, sure, if you say they need our help, we'll do it. Is that because the twins are siphons? Is that because they just love Valerie so much? Is it a little bit of both? Who's to say, right? But they do end up standing over Caroline, who tried to blow them up, and just doing the spell to make sure the twins can be born safely. The only reason why they have to leave is because Raina attacks and all of that starts going down in the hospital, right? And even then, Valerie stays and is like, I will do the spell anyway and we will get them out and it will be okay. There's a lot about the ending of season 6 that I don't like. One of the biggest things is that we don't even see Kai interact with the heretics. And I get it, like logistically, I understand that they probably hadn't even fully casted them yet. They weren't able to like blend those storylines. They didn't know where they were going with it, clearly. But it doesn't mean that it makes sense. It's such a fumble because you're telling me that 6 siphon exiles from the Gemini coven get woken up by their modern day siphon coven leader, and they don't think that's cool? Even the simple fact that they don't want to rejoin under him doesn't make any sense to me, because even if they wanted to like continue with the retcon and walk him back down the path of evil, why doesn't he bring them with him? At the end of the day, the bare minimum, they should have wanted to be at the wedding witnessing him taking out the coven. Like, if you want me to believe that they are crazy, awful murderers, why? Why weren't they there witnessing it? Why weren't they there clapping? And we know that they didn't rejoin under him because they don't die when the other people die. And maybe there's a loophole there where it's like they're already undead, so they wouldn't die once he kills himself. Like, it just wouldn't, it wouldn't happen. They would just be connected differently. But they're a coven, right? They're a coven. Like, that is how they are described, is their own coven. So either that's not real and it's just a phrase that they're using, or we are ignoring the fact that heretics do keep their inherent magic. And I have to believe that second one, because otherwise I just get real angry. Also, why is no one healing him? When we see him again, right? Because he disappears in late February, and then we don't see him again until right before the wedding, which is in June. Let me make that very clear. He's covered in bite marks, truly covered in them, and he's limping as though the knife wound from Bonnie has not been healed. And I don't know if that was just a mistake and it was supposed to be like a couple days in their minds, but really the timeline, it's several months. I don't know. I don't think it was. And if that's the case, why did no one heal him? Like, what is going on? In season 7, Valerie calls him that Gemini kid. Girl, don't piss me off. You should at least know his name. The whole reason they got locked in there in the first place is because they were out of control siphons and the coven wanted to get rid of them, and they were coming back to America to destroy the Gemini, and the Gemini were like, up, we're gonna put you in a box before you can do that. Now they're out, and you're telling me that they don't want to witness him doing that. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Like, there's so much wrong with the end of season 6, and y'all couldn't even make it believable. If you were gonna piss me off with that big of a retcon for Kai, you could have at least made it believable. You could have at least made me go, all right, yeah. But no, the whole time I'm sitting there like, where are they? They're at a shipping container down by the docks. What are you talking about, Julie? What are you talking about? You don't even know. Presumably, Kai doesn't know like what the heretics are. We never see him figure that out and like come to terms with it, right? We find out once he's already been sent in there from Jo what they are, because she calls Joshua and is like, they got rid of Kai again, and Joshua's like, oh my god, he's in 1903. That's terrible news. And we find out that he's gonna find out about the heretics, but like, he knew Lily was in there. And he tells Rick, when Rick is like, who else is in these prison worlds? He makes a comment where he's like, oh, I don't know, like probably crappy people just like me. And it's like, so did you not know that you had an option? Like, did you not know that you could half transition into a vampire and keep your magic? Like, again, did nobody tell you that? They just love to like block the siphons out from any form of like stability or happiness. And they're like, let's just pretend that's not a thing. That can't happen. You don't get to do that, because then what if you're extra evil because now you have fangs? And I'm just so tired. Anyway, when I write them, I usually have Nora and Oscar like him the most. Him and Malcolm fight like crazy because they're both the oldest, and so like obviously they're not gonna get along, right? Valerie's sort of indifferent because she only ever really cares about Stefan. I just think the missed opportunity there of the drama that could have unfolded, just, this is how I wrote it, right? Obviously this is my concept, so of course I like it, but just think of the drama of like moving forward into season 7 with like Kai also being one of Lily's heretics and her being like, well, I adopted the other 6. So get on board, you're a Salvatore now. And him being like, no. But then the other ones are like, oh, no, you're one of us. You are quite literally one of us. We're your Uber drivers, get in. Okay, that would have been so good. And then like the added complexity of like Joe seeing that and being like, oh, so you're starting over? Like you kill all of, and then you just, really? That's nice to see. And him being like, I tried with you. Like it, fumble. I think it's Damon who describes them as being like, Julian's like spoiled royal kids, and he's not wrong is the thing, right? Like I understand why Damon views them that way, especially because Damon's looking at it through the lens of like, my mom allowed us to be abused under our father and then left us and made a new family and now like pampers and adores her children. By the way, her children suck and she still loves them. Like, what is that? Just sort of ignoring the fact that Lily wants him and Stefan to join them. He can't see past the fact that like he was abused and now they're not being abused, to the point where he can't see that they are being abused, because Julian's not a good dad by any means. He's super manipulative and super fricked up with all of them. He loves to like instigate fighting amongst them to like keep his favorites loyal to him. But one thing that I find really sweet and that I think really speaks to the abuse they've suffered is the amount of like play that the heretics have with each other. In the beginning, we kind of only see like the infighting because they're all adjusting to life, right? And so the girls are kind of bickering and they don't like being trapped in the house together. But then Valerie gets hurt and they go hunt down those people and kill them for her because they're like, nobody touches our sister but us, which is sister behavior at its finest. And there's just lots of moments like where like Nora and Mary Louise are like cooking in the kitchen with Julian and they're like playing around and like flicking flour at each other and stuff like that. Bo like fences with Julian in the house and they're like running amok and like jumping over the furniture and stuff, to the point where Lily's like, can you two take that outside? It's very cute. Like the level of like joy that they seem to have together, and the fact that there is a certain level of like childlikeness to it. Like they're all grown at this point, right? But when it comes to interacting with Julian and Lily, they all sort of like age regress down because none of them had childhoods. I'm gonna tell you all the little details I can think of, right? So there's 6 heretics, let's break them down. I don't like this one. And personally, I don't mind that Bonnie killed him because I didn't like the way he looked at her. Also, he's the one who bit Kai when he wandered down into the cellar, and like, yeah, it was his fault for getting too close to the desiccated bodies, but on principle, he has to go. He's the goody-goody, like oldest sibling. He's the golden child that seems to have maybe replaced Stefan in Lily's mind. We don't really know why. Like, there's no specifics on what he does to earn this place because we don't see him very often. Like, we get hardly anything of him with the other siblings, just that they seem to have like a certain level of disdain for how good he is, and like they don't really like that about him. And then he dies very quickly. And when he dies and they find him dead, I think it's Mary Louise and Nora that find him and bring him home, devastation. They're all so upset, and that like sparks war amongst the heretics and the Salvatores because Lily's like, how dare you kill my son? I will say though, like the only backstory we really get for him is that he's the one that saved Nora. I'll get into what was happening, but the way it's described, I always assumed she was significantly younger, like maybe 10, 12 years old, and I pictured him as being like 16 to 18 maybe. He steps in and saves her from being killed and then like brings her with him to the others. And we don't know, again, like timeline wise, where that all shakes out. We just know that she was a young girl. He was theoretically older than her to be able to save her. I don't know. Maybe they were like watching, like they knew she was a siphon and they were just waiting for something to happen, and then he sort of swooped in and took her to the others. Maybe they were alone for a little while and then they met up with the others. We don't know. This poor man is yet another victim of TVD's crimes against characters of color. He quite literally doesn't have a voice. Part of his backstory is that he was a beautiful opera singer with this amazing voice, and he gets stabbed through the throat by Raina's sword, and then those wounds never heal quite properly and they're funky, and so he just never speaks again after that. We only ever hear a recorded version of his voice that like Julian plays for Lily at one of the parties, and then in the flashback, like we do hear him talking and singing and like laughing with the others, and then from then on, he's quiet. When I write them, I have everybody like pick up ASL and they talk to him that way. But like, they're witches. You're telling me there's no like mind, like thought projection spell? And that choice in backstory is very sad. And maybe if they like really made it clear that it's like a vow of silence that he's taking or something, because they sort of imply that, where Valerie is like, you know, you should be proud, you're a survivor, because he got away from Raina. And there's some implications that maybe he dealt with some torture with the armory, just like Nora and Mary Louise. But they don't do enough with him, because they don't do enough with any of the heretics, right? Like, I think they realized, oh God, we made too many people and we don't have time to do this and tie up the end of the show. So everybody gets lost in the shuffle, and it's just really sad and annoying because it leaves him with this like super unsatisfying story. Despite not talking, I will say that he's just as deeply rooted in the family as everybody else, which is really nice to see. Like, they care about him the way they care about the others. There's no like lack of like them communicating and understanding him, especially Valerie. She seems to like almost be able to like read his expressions, like to the point where she can read his mind. We know that they are tied together somehow, but again, it's never really specified. Like, Lily makes a comment where she's like, Beau and Valerie were separated for a little while and they found their way back to each other. So we don't know if they were like from the same town and then they ended up running away at separate times and ended up back together. But like, when his scar opens back up, Mary Lou and Nora are like, we're out of here, boys. We are running with him. And they take off, despite the fact that that's going to put all three of them in danger, not just him. Cannot believe, as much as I've said things about him and Valerie being close, that I didn't point out the fact that when she tells the truth finally and admits to Beau and Mary Louise and Nora what was done to her, and Lily's kind of helping her and saying like, no, I believe Valerie, like this is what happened, you know, Julian's awful. Beau is the one that breaks the line first and rushes to her, and at first we think like he's angry and he's gonna like be mad at her, but then he just hugs her, y'all. He just melts, and you suddenly are like, oh, he's not mad at her. He's mad because he feels like he was a bad brother and he should have seen it. Oh, and it's, good Lord, it's emotional. It's so sweet. And then they're like standing together and he looks back at Mary Louise and Nora like, come on. And Nora pulls forward and is like, yes, okay, I believe you. And Mary Louise is the one that just can't let Julian go. And one more thing, you know what's really screwed up? When the Phoenix Sword explodes and the stone blows up and all of the souls go flying out into new bodies, they run into Beau. Damon and Enzo and Bonnie find Beau. And Beau can talk because he's in a new body. And he's like, hold on, don't kill me. I'm Beau. And Damon's like, oh well, and kills him anyway. I've been talking for so long at this point. But I'm going strong, man. Like, normally I'm tired. I'm kicking it. My boy, my sweet, sweet boy. I love him. I remember the excitement I felt when I met him, because I said this before and I'll say it again. It took me like almost 2 years to finish season 7 and 8 because I was so annoyed with the end of season 6 that I had to just be like, I'm gonna close my computer and walk away from that. But then we meet him and I was like, oh my God, incredible. He's funny, he's charming, he's got excellent chemistry with everybody he's interacting with. And then, you know what? They still kill him. Almost immediately. Because why not? He has some backstory lore with Damon. We end up finding out that when they were getting ready to leave for Europe, Lily wanted to check on the boys one last time before doing that and sort of like starting over away from everybody. She had Oscar go see Damon and Valerie go see Stefan. And so Oscar meets up with him at a Confederate army camp and essentially like sways him into leaving the war because he doesn't want Damon to get hurt, which is a crazy choice because racism was there. Racism was an option. You could have just said Damon didn't want to do that anymore. I really love the switch up that we get with Oscar, because when we see him in the hotel room initially, he's like chill and laid back. He's like the fun, blood drunk brother that's just like vibing and having a great time. And then the second that the Three Stooges bring up the Phoenix Stone, he's like, huh? And he locks in and goes, actually, I'm a centuries old witch. Let me remind you for a second. I mean, he just bodies them so immediately. Like, it was such a good, I love the witch fights, and I love when they're really satisfying to watch him just whoop some ass out of nowhere, because up until 30 seconds before he was like and he's insane. I love him. When I write him, I lean into his humor because he's real funny, and I think it's really easy to imagine him vibing with Kai. Like, just put them in a room and let them smoke and play video games with a bag of cheese puffs in between them. Julie, I'm begging you. Oh, I love her. I love her. Spicy. This one is spicy. She's very temperamental. She's so mean. Like, easily the meanest of the girls. The girls in general with the Heretics really work for me. We spend the most time with them, so we get to know them more than the boys. Because, you know, Bo can't talk. So, and I so often skip season 7 and season 8 when I'm doing my rewatch that it's really easy for me to just like forget about them and be like, they don't matter. But then when I let myself watch, I just get frustrated about all the missed opportunities, because they do matter and they are interesting, and it's so her backstory is wild. Like, apparently her family were butchers, and so when they found out she was a siphon, they hung her up on the big giant iron meat hooks. Like, with the carcasses. They just strung her up in the back. Like, you can't give them backstories like that and then be like, don't sympathize with them, Sarah. They're the bad guys. Like, ugh. Yeah, dude, I bet they are. We watch Mary Louise really struggle with being in the modern world. This leaves her open to being like manipulated by Julian. Once the sibling fractures start happening, he really latches on to her and is like, you're my favorite daughter. You know that, right? You're so beautiful and smart and wonderful, and I'll take care of you if you just stay with me. And because she's so sort of anxious and unsure of herself and feeling very insecure, she relies on him heavily, because he's also sort of insisting that they do things the way they always have done. So he's not asking for change the way Lily is, and I think that makes Mary Louise feel safe enough to like lean on him even more. Part of what's so hard for her change-wise is the fact that her and Nora are a couple. Surprise, if you didn't know that. They're canonically a couple. Over a century they've been together. And once they get out and it's modern times, suddenly they don't have to hide anymore. Like, yeah, there's gonna be some people that are upset about it, but for the most part, nobody seems to care. Nora, she's fine with that. She's excited. It's like great news to her. Mary Louise is still very anxious and is like, I don't feel safe enough to do that, which again speaks to the trauma that they've dealt with. They don't really touch on the concept of what, specifically for Nora and Mary Louise, what that would have looked like for them to not only hide their power for so long and be like persecuted for that, but then also their sexualities. Like, grow up with these two hugely important aspects of their identities, like essentially being repressed and hidden for so long because they've been told over and over again that they're awful and evil and cursed and like they should be ashamed of them. Just think about those feelings for a second, right? We never touch on them. Nobody ever really goes into it or talks about it. But I see you girls. This is me rambling a little bit more about Nora and Mary Louise, right? Because I want to make sure that I really encapsulate everything that they were going through, because I don't want it to sound like I think Nora is like blameless in this. She's mean to Mary Louise, and she's very pushy with Mary Louise, and there's several scenes, like I'm thinking specifically of the moment on Halloween, like at the night of the Halloween party, where they're gonna dress up as an angel and a devil, and Mary Lou's gonna be the devil, and she comes down like wearing like a red dress that is like, you know, sleeveless and short, but it's like really high necked, and I think it's lace, like it's like a lacy high neck, but she struggles with like not dressing modestly because they left in 1903, right? So the fashion's completely changed, and Mary Louise is just overwhelmed. So she's already wearing like no sleeves, her legs are out, she's in high heels. She looks beautiful, and Nora tells her like, oh, you look so pretty. Yeah, sure, but it's kind of boring. Like, you're supposed to be a devil. And she like rips the shirt open, and that's when Mary Lou snaps and is like, oh, you want to see a devil? And kills the poor guy with the scissors. And great moment, but it's sad because she's acting out because she's also hurt. And that keeps happening. Where like, we see her struggling to like be bolder and be sexier and like give Nora what she wants, because Nora, I don't think she really knows what she wants. And it ends up becoming like a non-issue, because at the end of the day, Nora just wants Mary Louise. So they end up sort of like having this struggle and this fight, and then they slowly but surely like make their way back to each other, because they break up for a little while, but it's like, y'all are meant to be together. Like, they're never gonna stay broken up, right? So they just have to kind of work through their issues and then come back to each other, and it ends up being fine. But those rifts that get drawn between them, I feel like if Julian wasn't there, I don't know if they would have fully broken up, right? Because he just really like weasels his way in and like instigates the fighting because he wants to keep the power in the family. And it's just really gross to watch, because at the end of the day, they're just like emotionally unstable kids, and they don't know what they're doing, and they're struggling. And I think it's just really sad the way that we're watching them get kind of played with and manipulated like little dolls. So Mary Lou and Nora also get snatched by the armory, so we lose her for a little while, and when we get back to her, she has been pumped so full of the anti-magic drugs that she is like quite literally deteriorating. They never really go into why they make her so sick. I think it's sort of implied that like she took more than Bonnie, or maybe they messed with her because she was a heretic, like so the half vampire body like made it work faster. Who's to say? But she is already very sick when we get back with her, and then she ends up going out because she starts to siphon the sword in order to save Nora. Like, she in that moment is hoping like, I'm gonna die because I'm already dying, like I cannot be fixed, so let me do this last thing to save Nora. And then Nora ends up being like, oh no, 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 I cannot live without you. And so they go out together. But literally the last thing they do in the show is a selfless act they think is gonna help everybody. It ends up sort of making it worse because they blow up the stone and then like all the souls get scattered around. But they thought they were doing a good thing when they blew up. My girl. Yeah, I love her. So I mentioned her backstory with Malcolm, right? She is quite literally run out of the house as a young girl and nearly murdered in the street by her own mother. Before being a siphon, yeah. That's all. That's the only thing she did. And then Malcolm swoops in and saves her, and she ends up with the heretics and like meets Mary Lou somewhere along the way. They stay together, all of that. Sometimes you just gotta remember that at least you made it to 22, babe, because it could always be worse. Like, at least they let you live. Her moments with Bonnie mean so much to me. Like, oh my God, I know I always joke that Bonnie and I have a type, and that type is problematic brunettes, but it's true. Also, Kat said she was down for it. This was almost canon, people. I think Nora really speaks to the idea that the heretics and siphons in general aren't inherently evil. So much of what we see from them is what Kai says at the wedding, which is like, when your whole family decides that you're an irredeemable piece of trash, you should just prove them right, right? And that's what I did. That's sort of the attitude that they operate from, right? But Nora, when she's presented with the option to be good, she's like, oh, thank God, please. I would love nothing more than to try. Seems like that would be great news. We're gonna start over, yes. And she throws herself in it. And Bonnie makes it hard for her, right? Like, they don't like them. It's very clear from the beginning that the whole Mystic Falls gang is like, the heretics suck, they cannot be trusted, we should kill them all. And they do take over the town. So it's like, on one hand, I get it, I see where you're coming from. But then Bonnie's the first one that with Nora is like, you wanna be good? I guess we could try. And she helps her a little bit, and Nora thrives, y'all. But this is one of the things that causes a lot of tension between her and Mary Lou, because again, Mary Lou wants to like stay the way they were and eat people when they need to and be vampires. Like, that's what they are. And Nora's like, no, no, I think we could like make a life here and be really happy and have friends and meet people. And Mary Lou's like, we don't do that. There's 6 of us and that's all we need. And it gets bad because they don't really talk about these shifts. Like, again, signs of abuse, they all struggle with communicating their feelings, right? So Nora knows that she wants to try and be different. Mary Lou knows that old Nora used to like her being evil, so she's trying to be more evil to make Nora like her again, not realizing where that's coming from. And I think, again, Mary Lou's kind of overcompensating here, where she's still operating under the impression that like they assume that we're evil, So why don't we just be bad before they call us bad? And Nora's like, or we could just be good and we could prove to them that we can be different now. So like when Mary Lou like snips at Matt and is sort of like being testy with him at the party, Nora's like, oh my God, Mary Lou, you're making everything worse. And that leaves an opening for Julian to be like, I think you're perfect. Just the way you are, Mary Lou. Don't let her dull your sparkle. And it's like, bro, we're trying to get her to quit eating people. That's all we're trying to do. During the armory arc, she goes above and beyond trying to get Mary Lou back to the point where she ends up getting marked. And so she gets cut on her arm by Reyna's sword. And that's a big reason why Mary Lou is like, I'm just gonna get rid of this sword and then she won't be able to use it on you to put you in the stone. And so while Mary Lou is like siphoning that, Nora is like quoting poetry to her and then siphoning it with her because she can't imagine living without her. And if that doesn't speak to like unconditional love and devotion to each other, like how am I supposed to feel right now? Because the answer is heartbroken. When I write her, I always have her like weaseling in as Kai's favorite because she's so stubborn when it comes to Bonnie. And I'm like, if anybody could get under his skin and be like, but you like having sisters, don't you? It would be her. Like, she would be the one to do that to him. And as petty as she is, you can't tell me that she wouldn't think the Glinda nickname for Joe isn't the funniest thing she's ever heard. She'd be saying that constantly. It would lead to so many fights. Okay, so Valerie has the biggest backstory out of her siblings because she is tied to Stefan. If you watched my recaps, I'm pretty sure that I like really ripped into her, right? And like got really annoyed when she showed up on my screen. Again, that's because I forgot, because I suppressed so much of season 7 and season 8 because so much of it is dumb that I forget the good stuff. And the good stuff is this girl right here. She should have been Stefan's in-game. I said what I said. I would have just been 100% okay with them ending up together. Like, I think it would have been beautiful and cathartic for the two of them. Like, in my perfect world, the Hell Siren arc just doesn't even happen, right? And if it does, it goes down wildly differently than it did. Stefan stays a vampire, stays with Valerie. They go off on their own. If Damon wants to take the cure with Elena, by all means, babe, do it and die. I don't care. But these two go off together into the sunset because... what do you mean he went back to Caroline? Why was he with Caroline at all? As it stands though, she is the only heretic to make it out of the show alive, and we just never see her again. She comes back and does some Gemini magic with the twins off screen, so they reference her, but we never see her again. As far as what happens before her backstory with Stefan, we don't know. She is the only one that seems to have an enchanted object, so she has a necklace that she can draw from in times of emergencies that she uses during the flashbacks to like hide her and Stefan from Julian so that they can be cute and flirty and run off together. And we know that she is somehow linked to Beau, so whether they came from the same area or they just knew each other, we don't know. But they have like a really strong sibling connection that stays the whole time. So she gets sent with Julian by Lily to go check in on Stefan and see how he's doing. Over the course of like a day, they Romeo and Juliet it and just like fall in love immediately upon first encounter. And it is really cute. Like for a meet cute, like insta love situation, they have a lot of chemistry together. He's really sweet with her. He loves that she's a witch. He thinks that's really fun. And he has no context to be like, you're a siphon witch? That's weird. I don't like it. So she feels very like validated in her witchiness with him because he's not mean to her. He ends up getting her pregnant and she finds out right before the family is supposed to leave for Europe. They're running because Julian is in trouble, right? So he needs to go and he wants to take all of them with him because he is as obsessive of them as Klaus is over his siblings. Like, same level of control freakiness coming from him. So when he finds out that she's trying to run, he stops her and is like, where do you think you're going? You need to come back with me right now. And she's like, no, Julian, like, I want to stay. Like, I want to stay with Stefan. And he hears the heartbeats and realizes what's going on and beats her until she loses the baby. No, like, I know. Yeah. Then she freaking commits in the tub on the ship, I think, on their way to Europe and accidentally turns herself into Lily's first heretic without meaning to. She never tells Lily anything that happened. So I don't know how they walked back that she drowned in the tub. That's never really discussed. But somehow after she did it, then they all do it. So then they're all heretics and they go to Europe. Rampage ensues. Lily has no idea that she was ever pregnant, that she ever fell for Stefan. She just never tells her. And she does this because she's afraid that Lily will be mad at her. And she thinks like it'll feel like a betrayal. Like Lily will think like, you know, she did something wrong and she shouldn't have done that. And how dare she? And honestly, I think that just speaks to her abuse, because like rationally looking at Lily Salvatore as a character, I think it's very obvious that she would have had the polar opposite reaction. And she would have been like, that's incredible news. By all means, go back to him. Oh my God. I don't even think, like, Julian is afraid that Lily would want to stay and go back and like be with Stefan and like raise the grandbaby and everything. I don't even think she would do that. Like, I think that the other kids need her in that moment more than Valerie does. Very easily, I can see Lily being like, how incredible is it that Valerie, who I love, has fallen for Stefan, who I also love, and now they can be together and I'll know that she's gonna take care of him. They'll have a family. Maybe one day I can come back and see them, but I will know that he's safe and taken care of, while I go with Julian, with our other children that still need us and need us to take care of them, and we go off like we planned initially. I think she would have done that. I don't think she would have gone back with him like Julian's afraid of. Julian's also in danger, like I said, right? And she does love and adore him, and she is like still attached to the boys at that point, but Julian has her wrapped around his little abusive finger. Like, she would not have left him, I don't think, even for a grandbaby. So during the Raina arc, when Stefan is like running and trying to hide and everything, and Nora and Mary Lou are locked up, Valerie is with Stefan and they do end up together. Like, it slowly blossoms because he leaves Caroline behind, he stays with Valerie, and initially they're just friends. No, they were never just friends. They have so much chemistry from the time they're reunited to the time they break up. Like, it's ridiculous. So they get back together kind of slowly, but it ends up feeling like a very like, oh, it was just convenient to be with you. And I don't really love you. I love Caroline. Like, that's who I really love. And I just, all the things we know about Stefan Salvatore, as hung up as Damon was on Catherine, it's implied that that's how Stefan felt about Valerie, right? And you're telling me he doesn't fall to his knees the second he sees her again? Once he realizes that, like, she left him for these reasons and all, because he does. When he finds out about the baby, he loses his mind. He's crying. They kill Julian together, and it's this, like, beautiful cathartic thing where they're, like, really evil about it, and they, like, kill him in front of all his, like, friends and family, and he can't, like, get help. It's great, okay? What world does he not want to be with her more than Caroline? It just doesn't make sense. He even ends up being like chill and cool about it, and I'm like, girl, you should be so mad at him. You should be so mad at him, and also you just need to smack him silly because he doesn't need to break up with you. This is stupid. And then, like I said, she does some like weird Gemini stuff with the twins off screen. So dumb. I just scrolled up and realized where we were. It's time to talk about the Parkers.
These people are nice. Okay, more than I can say for our screwed up family.
More like ironic, but okay.
You're a parasite. You killed the people I loved.
Do it. Come on! Kill her!
Okay, so the Parkers. Base facts, right? We got 2 parents, they had 8 kids, but not in like a cute, we love being a big family kind of way, more so in like a, we messed up with the first one and we've been trying to fix that mistake for 20 years. Yay, we finally had a second set of twins. Woo! I think they were homeschooled. That's a personal headcanon. We have no proof of that. You can't tell me they don't give off homeschool kid energy. I say that with love. I think that would have made it easier to like keep a watch on Kai, but also like keep his power quiet and not like let him out and about. Also, if they weren't being forced to live at home until the merge, why doesn't he have piercings and tattoos? You can't tell me this man wouldn't have a lip ring or like an eyebrow ring that he could like spin while he's thinking. Like, as fidgety as he is, there ain't no way. I mean, in another life, they have like secret matching tattoos that they got before things went south. And like in the prison world, he just keeps like burning his off to try to get rid of it. But every time he dies and respawns, it just comes back and it's infuriating. We have to start here. I don't want to, we do. Joshua and Mama Parker. We know nothing about her. We don't even know her name. I don't even think it's in the paper. Like when they show you the like family massacred in Portland paper, I don't even think she's in there. Only info we have on her is Kai like looping her into statements with Joshua. So he says like, my parents called me blank, my parents did this blank. He's always talking about the 2 of them as a unit. implying that they were like unified in disliking him. Personally, for me, another belief that's never confirmed nor denied but might as well be canon is that she died giving birth to Lucas and Olivia. I think that's real tragic. I think it fits the family, and I also think it adds a little bit of spice and guilt to Luke and Liv and how they feel, and that's fun to explore in fanon. If this is your first video with me, I've gone on record multiple times with how much I hate this man. Cannot stand him. Would take him out with my bare hands. Happily. But I would like to say here and now that his first appearance in the show, oh my god, it's so good. Okay, so Damon, Stefan, and Rick go to the Parker family house in Portland, right? And they stroll up and it's this huge ass White House, looks normal from the front. You would never know anything horrible happened. Like it's pretty. It's a pretty house in the middle of the woods, cloaked under layers of magic to keep it hidden from anybody. They have to like break in with Miss Cuddles. They're strolling around, right? Trying to figure out like, do we just go in? Do we knock? Like why is there no one here? It feels like there's nobody around. And then all of a sudden, Joshua Parker just strolls into the shot, right? Where did he come from? The back garden? He's taking off a pair of gardening gloves, all nonchalant and slow. Maybe we should be worried. And he's radiating such quiet, confident power. I know damn well he knew the moment their car drove into the woods. Like, he's been watching them the whole time. That's the energy he's giving. I remember watching this for the first time and being like, yes, sir. You're Kai's daddy. I see it. I believe it. And it's just so good, right? Like that whole chunk of scenes, he's like, I'm Joshua Parker. And the second Damon touches his hand, he goes, Invisique. And they're gone. And then he knocks Damon out and kidnaps him and takes him inside. And so he just leaves Rick and Stefan outside. House is gone again. They can no longer get inside. They can't help Damon. No one's coming for him. He's all alone with the head of the freaking Gemini Coven. And he feels like it at this point. They're in the house. Damon's telling him like, hey man, don't worry, I'll kill your son the second Kai gets out. There's really nothing to worry about. And Joshua's like, love the enthusiasm, simply not gonna take that risk. He digs out a locket that only has Joe in it. It's a two-sided locket. One picture's been removed. Don't piss me off. He puts it in a bowl and just starts nuking Joe from the inside out. No questions asked, mercilessly. And you can say, like in that moment, he's saying things like, I've been watching Joe her whole life. She's lived a long, happy life. And he's saying that because he's killing her. And he's just like, she's had enough time on her own. It's time for her to go. Like, what? Doesn't even call her to be like, hi baby, sorry, gotta do what we gotta do. Your brother's getting out. There's no warning. There's no thought that maybe she has a boyfriend, you know, Rick outside. Maybe he wants to call and say goodbye to her. Nope, no time for that. She's got to go now. This is also the moment where while Joshua is talking to Damon, he tells him, like, if Joe merges with Kai, she will cease to exist. Which is a direct contrast to how he talks about the merge with Luke and Liv, because with them, he's like, you'll never be apart again. You're not killing each other. You're conjoining into one, and you're going to be one mystical being moving forward, and it's beautiful and special and an honor. And so I feel like in his head, or at least in the Coven's head, maybe they view the siphon power itself as like, I don't know if they want us to think that like Kai will like 100% absorb Joe. But even saying that out loud, it's like, doesn't that kind of seem like a good thing? Like if you're so worried about him being in charge, doesn't the idea that he would entirely take her in sound better to you than like just halvesies, like mixing a little bit? Like what is he gonna do, my man? Get rid of her psyche once he takes it in? Like I didn't think it worked that way. I didn't think you could do that. Even later on, post the merge with him and Luke, we have moments where we're clearly looking at Luke's influence on him. So like it did work the way it was intended to work, and just nobody chilled out for a minute to recognize that fact. And that will never not annoy me, because they wanted to be like, he's gonna kill all of us immediately. The second he merges, he's gonna kill all of us. You know what he did the second he merged? He disappeared and had a couple panic attacks for like weeks, y'all. He was gone for like a month, like half of January into the beginning of February. Nobody knew where he was, okay? He was just crying somewhere in the corner. So just like imagine if we had all like taken a second and calmed down. We wouldn't even be making this video probably, or I would be, and we'd be talking about wildly different things. And like, here's the thing. If he had stayed that cold and calculating and remorseless, maybe I'd like him more, right? But what ends up happening is we see that version of him one more time, right? We see it in the flashbacks with Kai, and then we see it one more time with Liv and Luke. And it solidifies for me truly how he feels about his kids, okay? Because you can't act like that and then make me believe that you also love them a lot at the same time. Like, I don't play that game. But what they end up doing with his character is turning him into a whiny, scared little bitch so quickly that I'm just like, who are you? What happened to that man taking off his gardening gloves a couple months ago? Where did he go, sir? I'd like him back, please. He is so scared of Kai before the merge even takes place. And I'm not even talking about this moment here where he's like, we have to kill Joe to get rid of him. I'm talking about later on, right? Like, the level of fear that he has over him is crazy. And I'm like, I feel like you're scared of him because you know what he's gonna do to you specifically once he wins and you don't have power anymore. But like, right now, are you the almighty leader of the Gemini Coven or not, sir? Because he's just a 22-year-old boy. Go kill him yourself. What are you so scared of? He's kind of skinny. You can probably take him. Don't let him touch you and you'll be fine. I'm of the mind, right, that while this man may have like an obligatory like love for his children, I don't think he's a good parent by any stretch of the imagination to any of them. This isn't even just specifically how I feel about him and Kai. This is in general across the board. Don't think he took very good care of any of his kids. If nothing else had happened, right, taking Kai out of the equation, the level of fear and nervousness that Luke and Liv have when they're going to meet with him to be like, hey dad, we don't want to merge. Seems like maybe that's not our job and it's not fair to make us do it when we have older siblings that were supposed to do it. Can we just like bow out? They're terrified, right? Terrified to meet with him. And they're treating it like they're meeting their coven leader. He's not their dad at that point. They're not talking to him as a parent. They're talking to him as a coven leader first and foremost. And that's very clear in the way they prep for it, right? Like, Luke wears a suit. He's all like clean cut and like perfect looking. He immediately, when he sees Liv, who she's already asked Tyler, like, she doesn't look like herself, right? Normally Liv is like in fun patterns and like leather and all kinds of stuff. Her like bra straps will show and she'll have like low cut tops on, lots of makeup. None of that is happening. She is like buttoned up, she's in a coat, like she's all put together and she doesn't have hardly any makeup on. And the second Luke sees her, he still says, oh my God, you're wearing too much makeup, like immediately, okay? So they're literally like trying to form themselves into like perfect kids to go be in front of him. And they know that it's still not gonna be enough. That's all I needed to know. I know exactly what kind of person he is. And then, on top of all of that, right, he tricks them, looks them dead ass in the eyes, and is like, we're family, we're in this together, lying to their faces before he tries to force merge them against their will. And like, in that scene, right, Luke is basically like, oh my God, Dad, really, are you serious? Like, oh, I knew you'd listen to us if we just asked nicely enough. And Liv's kind of like, I can't believe this worked, wow, this is crazy. And they're both like so emotional, and like Joshua looks at them and is just like, are you kidding? Like, we share a history, a bloodline. And I'm like, babe, just say you're their dad. Just say they're your kids. But he doesn't. He never does. And then at the red wedding, he has the nerve to be like, where's Liv? Where's my daughter? When everything's going to shit. And I'm like, now you want to pull the dad card? Are you joking? She's the last one left, and now you're concerned about her whereabouts. Don't know how to tell you this, but she's in the other room getting smothered by her boyfriend. There's also a scene in season 5 where when Luke and Liv have come, we don't know the coven that they're from yet, right? So the writers may not have even really intended for this to matter, but it does, because it follows his pattern of abuse later on. While they're sitting in the diner talking about how Luke messed up and Liv is like, the coven's really mad, like we really need to get it together and follow through with the mission, Luke starts getting like force aneurysmed from Portland. Now, who do you think, on the note of the parents as well, I think the fact that the 4 living kids have such screwed up views on like relationships and love, again, tells us everything we need to know about home life and how they were raised and the kind of like role model of a relationship that they have. Because again, I think it feels very obvious that those kids were just being like, they were being made to get to Luke and Liv, right? So It's not like there's like love and care about having big family. It's just like we have a big family because we needed these two here at the end. Like obviously Kai is sociopathic, so any like romantic feelings he has are always going to be tinged with like obsession, and they're going to veer towards that pretty much no matter what he does. Post-merge, he's always going to be questioning like, am I doing this because I want it or because I want something from it? Jo's a grade A runner. She tells us that she's never stayed in place long enough to fall in love. They're both terrified of letting people in and getting close to people again, but also like desperate, on their hands and knees looking for connection and community. Liv's mean as hell when she likes somebody. She's just mean as hell, hoping she can get them to leave first before they have the chance to hurt her. And she tells us that it's easier than admitting she likes them because specifically for her, she's afraid of dying in the merge, and so she's like, can't fall in love before I turn 22 because Luke's just gonna kill me anyway. And then poor Luke goes after older men exclusively, right? Like we learn that he has a habit of just sort of like having sugar daddies and like running off with them and doing whatever he wants. And they're like, hello, that's screaming, I'm not supposed to be the eldest brother. I don't want to be in charge. Can someone please take care of me? Like the daddy issues speak for themselves, people. Then we have the missing four that are in the middle between Jo and Kai and Luke and Liv. Just like their mom, we know like pretty much nothing about them. The only one that's named is Joey, and I've always assumed he was the third born probably because the way Kai talks about him, it seems like they had a decent brotherly relationship, like however that looks pre-merge. And I just can't imagine Kai having patience to hang out with, let alone play video games with one of the younger ones. So in my brain, Joey's like 17, 18 maybe. But yeah, I mean the other three, considering the age gap is 22 and 4, there's like no way they're not minors. Like they just must have been. And that's awful. That's horrific. Can't even fathom. It's why that arc is so fascinating, because that's one of the backstories that's just like, how the hell did we get there? This is also where those cult vibes come into play again, because when Jo tells us about it, she says Kai killed 4 of our brothers and sisters to make a point, but he was really targeting Lucas and Olivia. And that point is obviously, why do you even care if they're alive or dead, Dad? You only had them to replace us, and we're not going anywhere. It's so fascinating because it's also him proving the point of like, I know you love them more than me. Like, how are you gonna feel when I take them from you and you can't fix this? Because you're constantly telling us that we don't matter and it's coven before family. So are these guys even your family, Dad? Do you really care? But like, he knows that he does, and he's doing it to be hurtful and awful. It's just dark. It's dark and delicious, and I love it. Joshua does tell Damon, like, do you have any idea how it felt to come home and see what he'd done to my other kids? And it's like, for me personally, I'm like, why was he home alone with them, my man? If you thought in your brain, because they give us, like, obviously there's two sides to it, right? So like Kai says things like, they isolated me, they pushed me away, wouldn't let me touch anybody. And Jo is like, oh, Kai was isolating himself and he was acting out and blah, blah, blah. Like, so there's two sides to it, right? But if Joshua believed truly and deeply that he was deranged and a problem and awful and scary and terrible and should not be trusted to lead the coven, why was he anywhere near the other ones? Why was he home alone with them? Why were there weapons in the house? Why did we even have a baseball bat? It's just like, for me, that's another way of being like, you didn't really care about him that much. Because if you were that scared of him, why was he home with them? He's a siphon. You've gone on record being like, siphons are so dangerous, they're unstable, they're so scary, and you thought Jo could handle it? Do you see how I'm getting here with this? Because like, it starts to fall apart a little bit if you poke it a little too much. Because it's like, if you genuinely thought he was that scary, his ass should have been locked up. You're telling me Joshua didn't know about the anti-siphon spells? How did Bonnie find out about those? And Joshua didn't know? Almighty Coven leader or not, bro. The fact that they have the Ascendant like locked and loaded and ready to use on him just already pisses me off, because that makes it feel like they were waiting for him to do something awful enough to warrant being sent away. And I'm just like, I bet you wish it hadn't been this. Like, realistically, there's just nothing that can be done to make me like this man, because he could look me dead in the eyes and say, like, one time when they were 5, we woke up in the middle of the night and Kai was standing at the foot of our bed with a knife. And I'd be like, damn, is there a reason you didn't take him to the hospital? Like, you're telling me this giant mystical coven doesn't have healers? There's just nothing that can be said to put me on his side, because if you look at the family realistically, I'm like, you dropped the ball, my man. You had the ball in your hands, and not only did you drop it, you threw it first. You got rid of it on purpose and then went, where's the ball? I've never seen it in my life. So Luke is the youngest boy, and it does show. Like, he's the older one between him and Liv, but he's the youngest boy of the family. As a woman who married a youngest boy can confirm, that behavior shows. There are just traits that they have that they cannot hide. Like, okay, he has this habit of saying the most out of pocket, just wild things in front of Kai, while also being like, he's deranged and homicidal, he scares the shit out of me. Then when he's in front of Kai, he's like, I don't like you, and I don't like your face, and I think you're annoying, and I don't think you're strong as you think you are, and you're crazy. Like, he can't help himself. He just stays doing it. He really said, I was born to be the annoying baby brother, and if it's what kills me, so be it. But like I said, he also has the unique flavor of being the older one between him and Liv. So because the rest of them are gone, he ends up in like the fake oldest sibling role where like he's sort of stuck there doing that and protecting her. But then at the same time, he's the stronger twin. So if he thinks about the merge for too long, he has to admit that he's gonna kill her in the end. The guilt there, the shifty, awful feelings of guilt and remorse and like wanting to take care of her and knowing he'll be the thing that destroys her in the end. Are we kidding? I'm eating it up. When they get forced into merging, like in that moment, Liv immediately like buckles and starts like screaming out in pain. Luke can talk through it though, and he like grabs Joshua's arm and starts like screaming and is like, she's not strong enough, Dad, she's not strong enough, I'll kill her, I'll kill her. And it's so like, that's the level of sibling angst that just something in my brain is just like, yeah, like it's just so good. He's one of our only, just gonna let that go by. Timing there was real funny. He's one of our only canonically gay characters in the TVDU, and unlike a lot of the other ones, we don't see him with a partner on screen ever. I know I mentioned it, but they make it very clear that he's usually with older men. Liv teases him about going after like older rich guys, and I think like she references him having like a doctor somewhere else that he goes and sees. It's an interesting choice for him, and I think it makes sense given like what I've said about their trauma and everything. It's just like throwaway comments, like they don't do anything with it. They just like reference it and drop it in and then move on really quickly, and we're not supposed to think about it very hard. I feel like with this group specifically, like late season 5, early season 6, the writers were just like throwing us little dustings of lore and being like, please pick that up and put it somewhere and put it to good use, because we can't do anything else with it, but we want you to know this about them. Because there's just so many little things that are just like dropped in, and they all make perfect sense together once you start putting them in a little bundle. But as it is, because it's the freaking Vampire Diaries, we're not gonna pay close attention to it on the show. When we meet Luke, he's such a rule follower. Like, he's very like set in the ways of the coven. He's the one that's sort of like trying to keep Liv on task on their mission and like keep her focused, because she sort of is like, wow, this is kind of fun. I like Tyler. I like being with these people. And Luke is just like, that's not why we're here. Like, we need to stay focused. Because they got sent in season 5 to like deal with the Traveler mess unfolding. And I think that's really interesting and never really touched on outside of that. It seems very obvious that they're like in their last year and they're gonna be leader of the coven very soon. So Joshua's sort of like testing them and being like, go handle this together and see how you do. Because theoretically, Almighty Gemini Coven leader, he could just come over from Portland and handle it, and we never would have had to deal with the Traveler arc. But no, send your kids to do it as a test. But then Luke very quickly like flips, and suddenly he's the one that's like, I don't know, Liv, these people are nice, and that's more than I can say for our screwed up family. And like suddenly he sort of wants to stay and not kill anybody, and when he's confronted with like having to kill Stefan, he like panics a little and is not enjoying himself. Meanwhile, Liv is being real scary and intense while she's taking out Elena. So it's just interesting the way that they'll like flip back and forth, and they do that quite a bit. Luke ends up being the one that's like, we're not their dancing monkeys. We are not helping them with this. No, we've done enough. And so Caroline kills him. And then that forces Liv to like do the spell that holds the other side open so that everybody can get through while it's collapsing. But at the end of the day, like, she's only doing that to get Luke back. She's not really worried about the other people involved. She feels more guilt than Luke feels, but she's only doing it for him. Once he's through though, Liv is struggling, like, because again, she's not as strong as him. So the spell is like really draining her. It's killing her essentially. And so he watches her do it and she's like, I have to help, I have to finish this, I have to do what I told them I would do. And he ends up just being like, actually you don't. I'm pulling the executive decision older twin card and getting you out of here. And he cloaks her and takes her away from it, which breaks the spell. That's why Damon and Bonnie get stuck over there. So that moment though of Luke like cloaking her and taking her away and stopping her from working on the spell, that's really when Liv is like, you register what you just did, right? Because you cloaked me and stopped my magic and I could not fight you back. Like I was not strong enough to win. And even though like in that moment she was like partially drained and already very weak, they sort of have to come to terms with the fact that even if she'd been at full strength, like she would not have been able to beat him. And she knows that, and she's known it for a while. He knows it in the back of his mind, but this is when he's sort of like confronted with it and has to like, okay, shit, if we do this, I'm gonna kill you. Great. But at the same time, he's still the one that's like so in it to win it with the coven. Like Liv kind of picks on him for being like, you know, so much like Joshua and like wanting to follow the traditions and like buying into it so much. And Luke is like, yeah, but it's our job. Like it is our job because Kai is a problem. Like we cannot let him do this. He will win, he'll be leader, and then he'll kill us. Luke is big on that. Like he stays saying it. He's like, the second Kai takes power, we're all dead. And it's like, why would he do that when if he leaves you alive, he can draw on your power? Like think for a second. The whole thing that he wants is power. Why would he kill you? Why would he kill you, Luke? Just calm down for a minute. And Liv is the one that sees it that way, where on one hand, she doesn't want to die. So she's like, if we could just let them do it, it's their job, not ours. Like, let's just let them do this and then we can just like go somewhere else. Like, we don't have to be involved anymore if we don't want to be. And it takes a while for her to kind of break him down, but slowly but surely he gets on board with it. And so then they both end up like working with Kai to like get Joe's magic back and everything. And then we have the merge where Luke steps in and sacrifices himself not only for Liv, but also for Joe, which I do think is really sweet because I think he, like, when they get reunited, he's the one that's like, oh, holy shit, I have my family back. And like, you can tell that he's so happy to have the two of them. Whereas Liv is sort of like, I don't need a sister. No, why would I do that? Like, stay away from me. And Joe is emotional, but also a little closed off because of everything that happened. I find it really interesting the way that he goes back and forth between being kind of selfish and being like, we're here for ourselves. We only need to help ourselves. These people aren't our friends. Like, we don't have to do what they tell us to do. To then being the one to feel so guilty about Elena losing Damon that he gives her a tea that helps her hallucinate Damon. That's Luke's doing in the beginning of season 6. He's the one giving her that because he feels like, you know, I stopped the spell. I'm the reason why he didn't make it back to you in time. The least I can do is like help you get some closure and like deal with these feelings. He's also the one that when she gets like addicted and is having some serious issues, he's like, I can't keep giving you this. Like, we do have to stop at some point. Like, it's not safe for you to just take it forever. So he just has like an interesting little mind where it's like you can tell that he is really caring and kind, but then at the same time, he can be prone to like the same selfishness that the other ones have. I think that just speaks to the coven and the way that they seem to operate, where it's like they worry about themselves and then occasionally they'll take care of outsiders, but like, no, just kidding. We're actually just gonna stay over here and do what we wanna do. I don't wanna see a single comment though down there trying to tell me that post-merge Kai only cares about Bonnie because of this. No, post-merge Kai cares about Liv because of Luke. Luke and Bonnie didn't interact, okay? I don't even think they were ever on screen together at the same time. The scene where that unfolds and we're watching Kai sort of like manically be like, oh, I can't wait. This is gonna be so fun. I'm so excited to kill you. Like, he can't, like, he physically can't do it to the point where he's like slapping himself in the face and like having a whole panic moment. He starts crying in front of us. It's one of the only times we see him cry. He talks about crying, but it's one of the only times we see him like breaking down in front of us. And it's like, that's Luke. That's Luke. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, that is Luke in that moment, right? It's such an obvious, like, that has to be what's happening there. And I think Liv knows it too. I like to headcanon that little spell that Liv does to like let her see through Luke's eyes that she says they made up when they were kids playing hide and seek. I think that only works on Kai because Luke has merged with him. Now, she really is that girl. Like, there's nothing else to say. I still, to this day, can't believe how she went out, right? Like, the red wedding itself is bad enough. The end of season 6, nightmare all around. But Liv's death, wow, In another world, that could have been sick as hell. Like, that could have been really awesome. It's not awesome here. In this case, it upsets me. The two of them did so good, but it's just like crazy. It's insane. I'm like, who thought of that? Who said, we gotta get Tyler back into the werewolf gang? Like, he needs to be back on his curse bullshit. So, let's just have him smother Liv. This isn't touched on in canon, and it's really such a missed opportunity because I feel like he should have picked on her about it. But Liv has like a very clear, like, alternative style. She walks that line between like scene, emo, punk, like she's in that genre of clothing. So she wears like the really fun, I love her pants. I love when she wears like the funky pattern checkerboard. Like, yeah, girl, I had friends that looked just like you. I looked just like you. I get it. Combat boots. She's got these cute little like crow skull earrings that she wears. Ugh, I just love her, right? Jewelry. So much jewelry layered up on her. She's just an icon. She's a legend. She's everything to me. But I just know in my heart of hearts that watching her like mold herself into that style drove Joshua Parker up the fucking wall. He was like, I already did this once, okay? I got the grunge rat in the 1994 prison world. Why do I have a second one? What's going on? And Liv has no idea, right? Because we know that he like took away everything about the missing four and Kai and Joe, and they don't know them. Like, they have no context for like Liv like accidentally modeling herself after Kai. She doesn't know she's doing that, but Joshua does. And I hope it bothered him. I hope every time he heard her combat boots stomping around on the second floor, he was just like, so triggered, like instantly triggered. You can't tell me that like fashion choice, music choice, personality wise, she doesn't remind you of him. There are multiple moments where I'm just like, yeah, you're his sister, actually. When she flirts with Jeremy just to bother Bonnie, no other reason but to annoy Bonnie because she's annoyed that she's having to pretend to be bad at magic. So she's bored and annoyed doing that. So she just does the only thing she can do to quietly get back at Bonnie at that moment. That level of annoying pettiness, you're his sister. You are. She is known for being a bitch, right? Like, they talk about her like that. She talks about herself like that. Luke talks about her like that. Like, Liv is kind of a bitch. And we love her for it. A lot of her early stuff is just her bullying Tyler, because why not? Somebody needed to do it. Anytime she messes with him magically too, I just love it. Like that scene where he like slides too close to her in the chairs and is like trying to look at her book, and he's like, sorry princess, I was just checking the page we're on. And so she like ruffles his pages and like messes with his book in front of him. They're in class and he has to like smack his hand down to keep it from happening. I just love it. She does it with like the kegs too, where she like pulls it out of his hand and like makes it roll away, and he's just like, why are you doing this to me, Liv? And she's annoying. She annoys him on purpose because it is easier for her to be mean and cold than like soft and squishy and then let people get close to her, because then she could get hurt if that happens. I've never related to a bitch more in my life. Yeah, so when we meet her, she's conning Bonnie, right? So they show up, the twins get sent to Mystic Falls to like peep the traveler situation and handle that. Luke is dealing with Elena and like messing with her and trying to keep her in check. And then Liv goes to Bonnie and is like, I'm a newbie witch. I need help. Will you please help me? Because they need to keep an eye on her since she's the anchor. So Bonnie falls for it instantly. And Liv is doing a really good job of like faking accidents with her magic and like pretending to be really bad at it, which if you think about it, shows you how good she is, because she's making things happen while pretending like she's doing the spells wrong. But that means her control is crazy, because she's like blowing other things up while fake doing a different spell. And it makes the moment where she knocks Tyler on his ass and is like, not a newbie witch, just FYI, before leaving. So satisfying. Man, she's also mean to Joe when they meet in the Thanksgiving episode. Joe sees her and is like, oh my god, you seem so familiar. And Liv is just like, yeah, we've never met. You're dating my occult studies professor, I think, which I guess earned you a spot at Thanksgiving. She's so mean. She's so like, girl, that's your sister. When they realize that they can't stop the traveler stuff and they're gonna have to either kill Stefan or Elena, and they get between the car and crush it like a tin can between them, the twins are scared. They're scary, right? And no one talks about it enough. But Luke in those moments is sort of like we only have to kill one of you, like it doesn't matter which one, just tell us who you want to die. And Liv is saying out loud, I'm really sorry, like I know you don't believe me, but I am sorry, we have to do this, otherwise we'll get in trouble with the coven. But like that's how she's saying it. There's no, it's not like she's like, Elena, I'm so sorry. Like Luke looks upset, he looks distressed. Meanwhile, Liv is casually breaking Elena's bones and dragging her to the ground, being like, I'm sorry, Elena, it has to happen this way, with her hand out, just like, oh no, Elena, looks like you're gonna die. When she corners her in the shop, right, and like puts her up on the wall and then just casually breaks a steak off and strolls up to her to stab her in the heart. She's so scary in that scene. Elena's like shaken, stuck on the wall, can't move because she's been like held in place by magic, and Liv's just like, this is the way it has to be. You're never even gonna know why we killed you. Once again, louder for the people in the back. You're definitely Kai's sister. Definitely. Now at the same time, our girl is wildly sensitive, and like I've been saying, like a lot of her meanness is just her like projecting to keep herself safe, because she's so soft and squishy on the inside. She has a huge heart and like a huge capacity to like care for her friends. She just doesn't let herself do it very often. If nothing else, you didn't kill him, Tyler, I did, and don't waste it. Speak for themselves. Like, you don't really need to know anything else about her, okay? She was barely with Tyler at that point, and she killed a man for him so that he wouldn't inherit his curse again, because she knew how scared he was of that happening. They weren't a couple yet. She liked him, sure. They were not together, and she smothered a man. And then fast forward, they're broken up. They've been broken up for a couple months. And yeah, she was gonna die. Like, because of what Kai did at the wedding, she was dying currently in Tyler's arms. But she still lets him smother her. She goes out in pain so that he can trigger his curse in that moment and then heal and go on without her. That's so metal, man. What the hell? What I wouldn't give to see her go off with Tyler at the end of this, like, there's so much about the end of season 6 that sucks, because we lose all of them at the same time, right? And so all of these storylines are just like snuffed out so fast, like it's whiplashy, where you're just like, oh, so what was the point of a season and a half of getting attached to them if now it is just over? And then nothing satisfying happens moving forward, right? For really any of them, because like Tyler and Liv, that's his epic love. There's not anybody after her that we care about even a little bit. And same thing with like Rick and Joe. It's like, sure, he fell for Caroline, but like nobody cared, nobody liked that, nobody wanted it, and he doesn't end up with anybody else. He just stays lonely for the rest of his life, waiting to die so that he can be with Joe again. You didn't have to take him from us, and then we wouldn't be here. You can't tell me that she wouldn't be one of the witches vibing with the werewolves, right? She grew up in the woods. She's fine, she's comfortable there. Take her to the mountain woods instead. Mix it up a little bit. They just have such good chemistry together, and it goes past that into like the characters feeling like they understand each other so well, because again, like she smothers that guy for him before they're together. They're just sort of like lightly flirting, bantering, like it's will they, won't they at that point. They will apparently, because what do you mean you killed a man for him and you weren't even dating him yet? Girl, I just know that they would have made it as a couple. He would have been a great uncle. I love that we still see Tyler like involved in Rick's life, since they have like that connection with him. And so like they're at the that scene where they like try to put the diapers on the baby, and the baby's like, one of them, like, I think Tyler's like head pops off or something. Like, it's ridiculous. And Rick is like, yeah, you two can't babysit. But it's like, Tyler would be good at it. I know he'd be good at it. I know he'd love those girls. And we never get to see it. We never get any of it. And the whole mess with him like going after Klaus and getting involved in all of that nonsense, that never would have happened had Liv Parker been there. She'd have been like, we don't need to do that. Why would you go after an original? I think we should just get you into therapy, you know? Maybe we should both go into therapy and we'll feel a little better moving forward. Outside of Tyler, right, she spends a lot of time like sacrificing herself for Luke and like hurting herself for Luke in order to keep him safe. They love to like take one of the twins away and be like, oh no, I got your sister. Oh no, I got your brother. Like, I hope nothing happens to them. You better do what I say. And it works every time, because the twins aren't gonna let anything happen to each other. So anytime one of them gets kidnapped, the other one's just gonna do whatever needs to happen to get the other one back. As mean as she is to Joe at first, they do have that scene in the crypt where she tells her like, do you have any idea how cool you are? Like, you're so strong. Like, what we went through, you know, yeah, you left us and everything, but you went and did all this stuff, and you're so strong without magic. Maybe with it, you can beat him. Like, I think you could do it, Joe. And I'm gonna go on record and tell you that I don't think Liv's being 100% honest, right? Like, I don't think any of them actually think that Joe can win, but it's cute to see her being like supportive little sister in that moment, and at least like pretending, at least being like, maybe it could work. Like, I think you could do it. No, you don't. Don't lie to her. Like, you don't, she doesn't believe it either, right? Like, it's okay. Her attachment to Luke, it's so heartbreaking, especially given how like prickly she can be with everybody else. She loves him so much. Like, if Joe and Kai are mirrors of each other, Luke and Liv are halves, right? We see her multiple times go against like her usual morals and like her own well-being in order to keep him safe. And he does it too, right? Like, it's a mutual thing. They both have it. There's just a bigger emphasis on her doing it, like being the one to protect him. And I think there's like a certain level of like irony there where it's like, she knows end of day, if he's gone, she won't have to merge and she won't die because he's gonna kill her if they merge. And even with that knowledge, she's willing to sacrifice herself again and again and again just to keep him alive because she doesn't even care. Like, she just wants to be with him. The moment where she's doing the spell to like let everybody come across the other side and everything while it's collapsing is so, it's just so good because like Luke is dead, right? Like, he's been dead. Caroline killed him in order to get Liv to do this. And while she's doing the spell in the crypt, he is like casually sitting behind her as a ghost. So he doesn't cross over right away. He's just sitting there with her, like listening and like letting her do this and like talking her through it while she can't see him. He's just there with her, like helping her as much as he can. And when she starts to like break down and is hurting herself, that's when he's like, oh my God, frick. And he goes running to Bonnie and crosses over. The look on Liv's face when he touches her for the first time and is like, hey, Liv, I'm here. And she sees him. Good Lord, I cannot do it. I gotta go somewhere else. Once he loses to Kai and she knows that like Luke is gone and she's not gonna get him back, there's this whole like time period where she is just like so lost in her grief. Like, she's like a shell of herself, right? Even when we see her, she's not really dressing like herself. She doesn't have her makeup on like normal. She just doesn't look like she's doing well at all. She's lying to Tyler, and Tyler like tries really hard to be there for her, right? And he's dealt with his own fair share of loss and everything. So like with time, I feel like she definitely would have been able to like open up more and talk to him about it because he would be such a good person to like share that grief journey with. But what ends up happening is she sort of self-implodes and is like, I'm actually just gonna go after Kai myself and I'll kill him. Tyler's like, babe, if you do that, then you all die. Like, why would you do that? He hasn't killed anybody yet, so maybe we don't make him angry. Let's just not do that. This is the scene where Liv has her like breakdown moment of being like, I wish we'd just merged because then Luke and I would still be together. We've never been apart. Like, we've always been together our whole lives. I don't know what to do anymore now that he's not here. Oh boy. I need to, hold on. Look, so Miss Joe and I really go back and forth, right? Because on one hand, when she showed up, I was like, oh, there's never been another woman in my life. I love you more than words. Like, locked in with her so instantly. I was like, I love you. I think you're funny. I think you have good chemistry with Rick. Love that you're down for him to be a messy alcoholic. Me too, girl. And her death, honest to God, almost worse than Kai for me because it's just so stupid, and the fact that we could have loopholed it so easily to have her not die. Don't even get me started. We're gonna talk about it. But then at the same time, because of the way they retcon things and sort of like change things around and shuffle the lore, I reach a point where I'm like, I fear I don't understand you at all. I thought I did. You lost me somewhere in February 2013, girl. I don't know, we're not on the same page anymore. It's extremely telling to me that she ends up going into the medical field after everything, right? Because she spends her life, like every day of her life, fixing people. It seems to be like pretty wildly accepted in like fanon lore that Kai and Joe both have an interest in medical stuff, you know, because he cut on her spleen. without doing it wrong and she didn't die. But like, she obviously is the one that went on to get the degree and everything. I've always thought that like maybe their mom was into healing magic as a way to like give them a start to those interests, because that doesn't just come out of nowhere. There's also a lot to be said about maybe she was trying to fix Kai when they were kids and it didn't work, so then she just ends up going forward anyway. But the fact that Jo like stays on that track and ends up in such like an intense, fast-paced work environment, because not only does she like become a doctor, but she's like prodigy level so early. Like Rick tells her that. He's like, how are you so good at this? And she admits like, well, I don't do anything else. I left Portland and I don't do anything else. Like, this is what I have been doing with my life. I do not sit still. I do not date. I just work all the time. That's all I have time for. And she was even like a military medic, so she was like bouncing around from place to place. But she doesn't sit still for very long. And to me, that just screams like how afraid she is of like settling and things going wrong. She doesn't want to build a home again because it'll just get taken from her. I find it really interesting that she seems to have settled at Whitmore at all, because I think outside of her needing to be there like for the plot, like they needed all the Parkers in one place for all of that to come together in season 6, I don't think she would be under other regular circumstances. Like maybe had she not met Rick, she would have moved again, because I feel like the vibe is that she's just been bouncing from like hospital to hospital and never really like staying in one spot for very long. She's also essentially a high functioning alcoholic, just like Rick. Like it's one of the things that they bond over, right? I'm not just like projecting that onto her. That's something that they're like, haha, we drink a lot, isn't that fun? Like our lives suck. So she at least owns it. At least she's aware that like maybe that's not a great coping mechanism that she seems to have, but you know, it's working for her, so we're not gonna take it from her right now. She is a trauma surgeon though, so like, is that safe? I don't know. I think the way that I phrase it sometimes makes it sound like I think Jo leaving the coven and like leaving the twins with Joshua was like easy for her. So let me just say that like that's not what I mean. Like I recognize that that decision, while it is like it's inherently a selfish choice, right? It was also the only thing she thought she could do for herself. Like she had to get out, and so she had to leave them behind. And the only way to do it safely was like a full cutoff, because the coven is really secretive and intense. I always joke that she like changed her name to make it harder for them to find her. Joshua tells us he's been watching her for years. So she didn't do anything to like block herself from locator spells, apparently. That energy of her like having left them and then never settling and never like truly starting her life over, I think really speaks to how much that sucked for her to leave them behind and like leave that life behind, because she almost never really puts it away completely. She's just always running from it forever. Like Rick even puts that in their vows, right? He says like, I promise to be with you and love you and dodge fate with you for the rest of our lives. She's not dodging that knife, babe, but sentiment was there. It's editing, Sarah. I'm jumping in because somehow I forgot to touch on one of the things that for me personally screams abuse, even though they tried to pitch it as something else, right? So when Jo and Rick get married, there's this moment, it's one of the only times Rick and I 100% shared that brain cell, that little alcohol soaked brain cell he's given it to me. We're sharing it in that moment. When Jo and Rick are getting married, there's this moment where Jo is like in her room getting ready and Rick wanders in and he says like, I think it's really big of you that you invited the guy who tried to kill you to your wedding. And he's talking about Joshua, right? He's talking about her dad. And I'm like, thank you, Rick. Like somebody needed to say it. And I just know, right? I have to believe that there was a writer in that room that was like, we have to acknowledge that this is screwed up because otherwise they're just not going to let us get away with it. Like, this is dumb. He shouldn't be at the wedding. He shouldn't have been invited. He certainly shouldn't sit side by side with Liv, and Liv shouldn't smile at him and sit a little closer, right? Like, we didn't get into that in Liv's section either, but that is insane. Like, the retcon for the Red Wedding goes far deeper than just Kai and the nonsense there. But again, you can spin that moment of Liv being okay with him and having like gone back to him in Portland, presumably, as being like, she doesn't know anything. Like, they don't know anything else. This is normal for them. This is how their family operates. So like, of course she's gonna smile at him. Of course she's glad he's at the wedding. And then with Jo, I feel like I've talked about it a little bit, like the pressure that I feel like she was probably under. The thing that we never really get from Jo is her version of what Kai talks about with Caroline, and the idea that like he always knew he was like the defective twin and she was Glenda. Like she was the perfect witch who did everything and had all this attention on her. She was this perfect witch that did everything right and had all this attention on her. Like that has to be damaging for her. In the same way that he was warped and screwed up, I think it's really easy to see that that did stuff to her too. So on that front, eldest daughter to eldest daughter, I do get her, because when you have a narcissistic parent too, right, like it's really hard to put up boundaries and it's really hard to tell them no. And the fact that he waits until right before the ceremony starts to be like, I would just never forgive myself if I didn't at least ask. You're still my daughter, Jo. Shut up. Shut up and go back to Portland, you little rat man. Let her be happy. Oh my God. If she wanted you to walk her down the aisle, she would have asked you. She would have called you up on the phone and said, did you get the invitation to the wedding? Would you like to come and walk me down the aisle, Dad? I think that would be nice for us. I think you should do it. How dare you? Go away. Like I just, it doesn't give me a single warm and fuzzy feeling. It gives me the ick. Really enrages me that he had the freaking nerve to show up there on the wedding day and be like, baby, please, can I walk you down the aisle? No, sir. But the fact that Jo gives in, I wish, like, because she dies, right? Like 30 minutes later. So we never get like anything done with that. It's just a moment that happens and we're supposed to just be like, cool, she said yes, and then move on. But like, in my soul, I know she didn't want to say yes. Or she did, just for the simple fact of like, wouldn't it be nice to pretend my dad is nice and normal and my family's nice and normal and I'm just a girl who can have her dad walk her down the aisle on her wedding day? Maybe that's why she did it. Maybe that's why she said yes. But like, somebody should tell me. Like every time I'm like, Rick, my man, why didn't you just burn the invitation? Also, her reaction to like seeing the twins for the first time and then like having Liv try to comfort her and then waking up and Luke doing the merge in her place. She has like love for them that is very clearly still there, even with the time skip. I just personally can't imagine reaching a place where I would willingly leave my siblings. While something of this level has never happened, my siblings and I have been through a lot, and let me just say, you would have to pry me away from them. Kicking and screaming, you're not taking them from me ever again. And I said I had a bias, right? Everybody responds to trauma differently, but it's just older sister to older sister. I can never get past that. I'm like, what do you mean you moved across the country, Jo? What do you mean you didn't check on them? What do you mean? Like, we have that moment of Kai saying to Liv, I'm really sad you didn't recognize me, like, because that means that Dad just like erased me from existence. Like, do you not know what I look like? That's insane. But it applies to Jo too, right? Because they don't know her either. Joshua doesn't even warn them that they're going to Mystic Falls and she's in Whitmore, because at that point, theoretically, he knows where she is, or at least like the general area of where she should be. Doesn't even tell them, hey, by the way, your older sister, she's out there too, like, say hi if you run into her. No, there's no problem or worry of him sending them there because they don't know what she looks like either. Like, they have no idea who she is anymore. Okay, I mentioned it with Luke and Liv, right? But have y'all heard that saying about twins where it's like, are you mirrors or are you halves? Like, what's the vibe here? Luke and Liv are definitely halves, right? Kai and Jo, full stop, mirrors. And that's one of the reasons why she dislikes him so much. Like, I clocked her being connected to him because at the same time that Damon was going, oh my God, Kai's the most annoying person I've ever met. He's so annoying. And Kai's like cracking jokes and being silly. Jo's over here with Rick going like, listen, Rick, I'm just obnoxious enough to tell you what I want. I'm hot. Don't you want to date me? And I was like, hold on. I'm connecting the dots. And then when she saves Rick and he's like, how did you find me? And she's like, I followed you like some kind of crazy stalker. I was like, oh, the family resemblance is showing. I mean, like, when she's saving him, she's like yelling at him at the same time, right? Where she's like, you don't get to have the last word with me. Wake up! Just so clearly. Exactly. Like, of course, yeah, you guys are twins. What are you talking about? I just feel like there are such obvious aspects to her personality that just like scream Kai. The shared humor, the morbidness, the dead-eyed look when she's wrapping her arm up and she's like, oh, does blood make you squeamish? Don't worry, you'll get used to it. And then like runs off to go help everybody in the field, and Rick is just like, I could start eating these kids at any moment. But things that they share that I think people forget or like don't click on to as much is like her selfishness and her arrogance. Leaving the coven and starting over, like I said, is a selfish choice. Like, yes, she had her reasons. Like, it's still a selfish decision, especially just in the context of the coven, right? Because like, that's Joe's job. Like, she should merge. She's the next set of twins. And she's just been like, nope, just kidding, can't do it, it's not safe, I'm bouncing, and you two are gonna have to do it instead. That's not fair. And on top of that, like later, once the merge is over and Kai has won and then been subsequently like popped off into 1903, we never see her address how Liv might be feeling. I don't know if it ever even really occurs to her, which is crazy. We see Joe get sad about Luke dying and she's holding him and like cradling his dead body, and she's very upset. She's upset that he's there at all. She's upset that he stepped in to save her. She's upset. She doesn't call Liv. She doesn't ask for Liv. She doesn't try to find her. And it's a writing thing, right? Like, that's not on Joe. It should have been written in. But we don't even get a whiff of a reference to her like checking on Liv to see if Liv is okay post Luke dying. And then when we get closer to the wedding and it's like bachelorette time, it's just Bonnie and Elena with Joe at the bachelorette because she didn't have any friends because she doesn't make attachments to people. And she says out loud, I wanted Liv to be a bridesmaid, but she won't return my calls. I don't know what's got her so upset. Now, what do you mean? What you don't think maybe her twin dying in your place when he was never even supposed to be involved in the first place, and then now the last remnants of him that are shoved into your twin got sent to 1903 and you didn't even tell her? And everybody else is really happy about it, but she'll never see the bits and pieces of her twin again because you don't like yours enough to try to see if the merge worked and see if it'll be better now. You don't think that maybe that could be upsetting her? Joe, really? That's selfish. And that's, again, it's on the writers. It's like somebody should have written that better, but that looks so bad on Joe's part. What do you mean you don't know why she's upset? What do you mean you don't know why she won't return your calls? Do you have a brain? And then as far as her arrogance goes, like she straight up looks Rick in the eyes 2 or 3 times and is just like, you understand that I'm wildly out of your league, right? I'm the hottest, smartest, most talented woman on campus. You're a deadbeat loser with pretty eyes and a drinking problem. Like, you get that, right, Rick, that I'm settling? That makes sense to you? And in his defense, Rick is like, yes, ma'am. And like, is she accurate in saying those things? Yeah, but that's arrogant as hell. I stand by the comments I've made where like, if Kai and Joe had merged the way they were supposed to, truly and completely, he would have been the monster that they so desperately wanted us to believe that he was. Because you're gonna put the energy of 2 Tauruses, okay, the intelligence, the stubbornness, the selfishness, into one body, we're doomed. We are cooked. And I think that like Josie later on, those aspects of her personality that Kai sort of like amplifies and like reminds her of and brings out in her, she's terrified of them. She doesn't want to be like him. So then he has to go, because as long as she's not looking at him, she doesn't have to remember how similar they are. But then, y'all, she has this line in Legacies. She comes back as like a weird monster ghost thing. It's her, you know, she comes back in season 7 and it's not her, it's like Florence in her body. This is actually Joe being like reanimated by magic, and so they don't get to keep her for very long, but we do get to see her again, and it's really nice. And so she gets to see the girls, I think they're 16 at the time. So she's talking to them and saying goodbye, and it's really emotional and sweet. And she says, be good to each other. Fight for each other. When you're older, you'll know what I mean. And she's talking about the merge because they don't know about it yet at this time. But like, Joe baby, I'm older, right? I'm older, and I need you to walk that back and explain, because I would like to understand what you meant by that. And if you're not careful, I'm just gonna assume that you're aware that you let them warp you up and turn you against Kai in a way that sort of like instigated a lot of what was going on with him, because you also hated him and that fed into his own insecurities. And because even you didn't love him, there was nobody to be there for him, and you were supposed to be his twin. Like, out of anybody in the way, you should have loved him and you still didn't. And it got so bad that none of you could fix it. And now you're looking at your girls who do fight sometimes and have a lot of similar issues, if we're being honest. And you're like, please, God, don't fight the way that we did because it'll just end in one of you getting stabbed at your wedding. Like, I feel like that's what you're saying there. Did I get it right? Because I'm of the mind that Kai and Joe would have been like quote unquote normal siblings for at least the beginning part of their childhoods, right? Because I don't think he was born a sociopath. I subscribe to what I think is very clear in the canon, that like his sociopathy developed from the trauma he was enduring as a child. I don't think it happened right at birth. I don't think he came out like that, which leaves time for him and Joe to grow up together. And with the psychic link, that would mean that she is feeling all of his pain and aware of everything that's happening to him, and then also aware that nothing's being done to stop it, right? Like, it's just, he's just getting worse as the years go on, and no one seems to care. And I don't even just feel this on Joe's side of things. It's the fact that Kai also, like, even in his like pre-merge, like deep in the sociopathy, he still has what he calls a soft spot for her, right? Which tells us that like that started somewhere. So there has to be a before things got bad that they can look back on. And I'm just like, that had to suck for her. Just imagine, like, psychic link or not, you're watching your twin like warp and shift into this thing that you don't understand anymore, and no one around you is doing anything about it. Like, you know it's happening. It seems like everybody else knows it's happening because they keep telling you how awful and scary he is, and yet nothing's being done to try to help it in any way. In fact, we're just sort of compiling it, making it worse as the years go on. And I'm not saying at all that it was Joe's job to fix him. Like, let me make that very clear right now, okay? They had parents that should have put that boy on meds and into therapy, like, immediately. But just the idea that, like, her witnessing that happen and, like, being at the time one of his only connections that seems to go past how he normally feels about people, but even that's not enough to keep him stable. Like, she can't love him into being better. That's not how it works. And so at some point it becomes too much for her, and we get to the smirk when he's being sent into the prison world. Like, when he realizes that she has lied to him and tricked him with everybody else, and he's like gonna get attacked by Joshua and everything. That moment, I think, speaks to like her level of resentment towards him. And we really never talk about that. We all focus on Kai being hurt and kind of like what he went through dealing with her not picking him too. But just think about like your Joe in that situation, growing up as the heirs of the Gemini coven. You're watching your brother be hurt for forever, but you also know that like he is going to kill you. End of the day, when you hit 22, he's gonna kill you. Like, you cannot beat him. So it's like this double-edged sword, right? Because his power is like his biggest insecurity, but it's also the thing that like secures the win for him in the end. Like, she knows how sick he was leading up to 94. She knew better than anybody how sick he was getting, what was gonna happen when they finally told him like, hey, no merge, bro. And it feels like nobody did anything to corral that into not blowing up. And that again, I mentioned it in Joshua's section. It's crazy to me because I'm like, why? Were we just hoping she'd be enough to control him? You said it yourself multiple times that like he's dangerous. Like, you think he's dangerous. You think his power is theoretically uncontrollable. Why is Joe ever going to be enough to stop that from happening if you don't even think she can beat him in the merge? And I feel like the pressure that must have put on her to be like, you have to be the one in charge, you have to be the one to like keep him away from the other ones. Like, what are you, she's just a kid too. Going back to the like fight for each other line, I just feel like both of them wildly missed the mark on like what the merge was supposed to be about, because I do think he wanted her to fix him. Like, I think he felt like, your magic is my magic, give it to me and then I'll be better and they'll love me again. And she's over here like, you know, hate that you're sick, really don't want to end up in your head because I know how fricked up it is in there, and also I don't want to die. What if we didn't do that? And so the fact that like at the end of the day, if they believe what the Gemini coven believes, they were supposed to be together forever. They were supposed to be whole together. Like, that is the way they should be, halves of each other. They shouldn't be mirrors. That got lost. That got lost along the way, and we ended up where we ended up. I've said it before and I'll probably say it again, but my favorite shot in the entire show, all 8 seasons, is the aerial view at the red wedding. Kai collapses, he's back to back with Joe, they're dead on the floor together, mirroring each other for the last time. Yeah, that cinema. I am gonna talk about it. I'm circling back because somehow we just didn't touch on the deleted scene. It's everything to me. The Joe and Kai deleted scene is so unbelievably good. It means so much to me. There are so many moments where they are quite literally mirroring each other so deliciously. Like, it shows that they fight the same way. It shows that they argue the same way. It shows that Joe has the same level of rage in her. Their tempers, they're always right there. You know that drawing of Stitch where it's like, here's your badness level? They have that same level. It's just that Joe puts a lid on hers and represses it like crazy. And then when he's involved, it just comes out and she can't help herself. In that scene, right, he tells us, I want to kill you for what you did to me. I hate you for what you did to me, but I can't. Like, that comes out of his mouth. He said, but I can't, because he needs her. Like, he needs her to survive. He needs her magic in this moment, but also he needs the coven. Like, he can't just kill them and start over. If he does that, he will lose connection to them. He will lose the power that he can draw from them. It's all right there. And then there are moments, right, in this scene where she breaks too. This is when she tells him, I don't believe you because you're a liar, and you're the worst type of liar because your lies sound so much like the truth that I can't tell the difference. And then we watch Kai sort of unravel a little bit, and for the first time, like, really rip into her on like, yeah, girl, I am broken and awful, I'm aware. And she gets this look on her face when he starts being, you know, honest and telling the truth. Like, her anger just sort of like dissolves. And she's like looking at him truly. They have this moment where they're actually talking about it for the first time in at least 18 years minimum. But then she doubles down. And I do think it's important that she doubles down and says like, fine, I will help you. This is the last thing I do for you. After this moment, get out of my life. I never want to see you again. I think that's important for her. I think the fact that she is standing on that says a lot about what he's put her through, the damage he's done, and the fact that I do think she genuinely believes they can't be fixed. Like, what has happened between them, it cannot get any better. Oh God, one of my favorite scenes. It's such a small moment, but I love it so much because I live for Joe Kai angst, right? Like, if you've read my fan fiction and stuff, you know that that's like what feeds my soul. There's this moment pre-merge where he has her locked up in the cemetery, and initially, like, you know, they're fighting. He like stabs her in the arm because he's trying to get her to take her magic back from the knife. So he like stabs her with it, thinking he can just like make it go back into her, and that doesn't work. And she's like, it's my choice. Like, I have to take it back when I want to do it, and I don't want to do it right now. So go get me a bandage or I'm gonna bleed out. And he's like, okay, great, I'll be back in a minute. He ends up like tormenting Liv and like essentially being like, if you don't take it back, I'll barbecue our sister. You want to see me do it? Because I will. But then she does, right? Like, she takes her magic back from the knife, and the energy between them just shifts so immediately, and it's such a good scene. Look at the look on his face when she does a spell for the first time to break the chains that he's got her in. That's a weird sort of like twin pride, I think. Remember what I said about him feeling like her magic is his magic? Like, it's all confusing and awful, but like, look at the look on his face, right? Then to make it worse, here's how Joe looks at him when he reaches for her and like feels her magic under her skin. That's the first time she's felt his power in 18 years too. I'm in pain. She gets this same look on her face when he says goodbye to her after she gives him her power and he's like, have a good life, sissy. Like, that moment, same look on her face. She's always surprised when he reaches for her without hurting her. And again, that to me speaks to a time when like that was normal. And now it's surprising because otherwise she would just immediately pull away from him and be terrified. She never really pulls away in these moments, right? Where she's staring at him like, are you gonna hurt me or no? Is this real? Are you being truthful right now? She like waits it out to see, and you can tell that she's kind of nervous. I mean, should be, girl, he's a little scary. But she's also letting it happen. The hospital scene between the two of them, not even the deleted one. I'm just talking about the initial, like when she's examining him and they're like bantering. The twin banter between them crushes something in me that like I just can't express. But then there's that moment where he like pauses mid-sentence and she knows he's gonna puke, so she like grabs the trash can and like turns around just in time. He like falls forward into her, catches himself on her arm, and sort of like automatically siphons because he's in pain. Joe doesn't yank away from him. She could very easily even just like step back and he would like fall onto the floor. And what does she do instead though? She just stands there and keeps him up. Rick gets them apart. She's like, asshole, you juice box my magic. She doesn't do anything to him. She doesn't like reprimand him any other way than that. And he apologizes and they move on from that moment because she knows he didn't do it on purpose. Now again, that speaks to like an understanding of his power that it feels like nobody else has, right? Because everybody else tends to be like, scary, scary demon, cursed power, we don't like it, don't touch us. Joe lets him touch her and he reaches for her to touch her. And I just, I got a lot of thoughts on that alone, okay? I'm just popping back in to gush about her a little bit more before I get to the end of her section because I really do love Joe and I just need you to know that, okay? And a lot of what I love about her is sort of like fanning ideas and lore and sort of exploring her in a more realistic way, because I do think there comes a point in season 6 where suddenly like all of this stuff that we got in like the first 2/3 like retcons out and we move into this place where it's like, oh, I guess we're just pretending like none of that happened. Okay. When you don't cut her off and retcon her, I feel like where we could have gone with her is just so interesting and it will never not be interesting. I am glad that we get to see her again later on in Legacies. Like, I think her character, like I said, almost more than Kai, like if we had just kept her in the show, I would have been satisfied. I would have liked season 7 and 8 more, like infinitely more okay with her being involved in the end of the show than the whole baby incubator plotline. And you know, we could have even done that, right? We could have done that a different way, and maybe I would have been slightly more okay with it if Joe had just made it out of the Red Wedding. I just think she brought a lot of like warmth to scenes, which is funny because I'm out here saying like she's not super like lovey-dovey and stuff. There's just like a chemistry that she has with like characters like Elena, where she very easily like fills a motherly role with her in the same way that Rick kind of fathers her. And I think that would have been really interesting to give Elena a mother figure again, especially because Joe and Jenna are similar. Like Rick has a type in women, right? So there's similarities between them that I think would have led to some really good scenes with Elena and Jeremy too. Like that group as a family unit with the twins, I could have been so cute. I love that she's overconfident, right? Everything I love about him, I love about her too. And we don't have a lot of women like that are just like, actually, I'm the best. Thank you for noticing. And it's okay if you didn't, let me remind you. Because like Catherine and Rebecca sort of fill those roles a little bit, but then they get pushed into like, actually, you're evil. You're evil and you're nasty and you shouldn't feel that way. And they get put in like the mean girl role. Joe never goes that way with it. Joe's never the bad guy. So she just gets to be like cool and confident and hot, and we just get to love that about her. I just wanted more with her. I wanted more jokes. I wanted more time with the girls. I wanted her to keep making Rick better because she was doing something for his character that hadn't been done since Jenna, and we all needed it. I was back. I was a Rick stan once again, until she died, and then it all went out the window. We just talked about the scene with like the girls in Legacies. She gets a goodbye with Rick, right? Like a proper goodbye with Rick, because there's that awful moment in season 7 where he says goodbye to Florence and it's not Joe, and she says like, your wife was really lucky. You would have been a really good husband. And it's like, you weren't even married fully. It was mid-ceremony, if I remember correctly. But he does get like a little bit of closure in that moment, right? Like he at least feels something, like he's saying goodbye to her. But then later in Legacies, it's actually Joe. It's Joe's reanimated spirit, or however you want to look at it, plucked from the other side. That's not really the other side anymore, but something that's there, and plucked over and given to them to like talk to her for a little bit. So he gets to hug her. And he's crying, and it's so sweet. And she asks him, she's like, are you happy? He says like, I'm happy right now in the arms of my demon-possessed baby mama. It's so funny. They're so funny together. But it's sad too. It's really sad because Rick's not okay. And we all love to rip into like Legacy's Rick, right? He's terrible. Don't get it twisted. That man nightmare of a person. What are you doing? What decisions are you making? You're an idiot. But it's like, Joe's not there. Of course he is. Of course he needed her. He needed her to keep him on track. He needed her to keep him, that one weak little alcohol-soaked brain cell, it needed her. He's miserable. He has a picture from their wedding in his office, and that's like one of his only like family photos is a picture of him and Joe, and it's not on his desk, it's across from his desk, so he can see it every time he's sitting down. And we're just left with this impression that he's only trying to like get through the girls maybe merging, and then he may just give up and go to Joe. And that's crazy. But that is like the impression we get, is that he's miserable. He's never been more unhappy in his life. He desperately needs to be back with her, and he cannot keep doing this. And you know, he told us that in the very beginning. He told Elena, I'm not qualified to be a parent. Maybe we should have listened to him. As many of you know, despite his numerous war crimes, he is my favorite TBDU man. There is no one else. It's just him. If you're watching my originals recaps, I'm losing my grip on Elijah as the days go by. Okay, so it doesn't go away where he's concerned. I've seen the worst, and I'm still here. No matter the nonsense he gets up to, I will stand by my witchy woo man through death. You know, he's come back to me twice, which has honestly given me like a complex, because now I never believe it. I'm like, sure, you took his head again. That sucked. Didn't like watching it the first time. Hated it just as much the second time. But you know what? I can guarantee you that wherever his little bitch ass ended up, he's plotting. And you should all stay nervous. His character and storyline, like I said, handcrafted for my biases. As it was unfolding the first time I watched it, I was like, wow, what am I supposed to do with all of this? You know how some people have like comfort characters? You have this like secret third thing that's like, in another life, if I'm not careful characters. And the only two people on it as of 2025 are Kai Parker and Fiona Gallagher. I was born to be the crash out sibling, and I'm never gonna get my chance. Like, it's not gonna happen in this life that I'm living. But man, I understand them. I try really hard to stay out of actor fandoms, right? Like, when I engage with media, characters are characters. They're their own thing. It's a world in and of its own, separate from whatever the actor is. That's how I can do things like love these two characters, right? That's Rick and Cole. That's who that is to me. But it's really hard when someone like Chris Wood is involved, because oh my God, if you know anything about him, he seems so genuine, so kind. Because I engage with so much Kai stuff, sometimes Chris's videos like pop up on my FYP and I'm like, whoa, I have to get out of here quick, but he'll like suck me in before I can get away. So like, I know that he's a trained theater actor, right? And I feel like that is why I like Kai so much. Stay with me. He's very like immersed in the moment when he's acting, and that leads to a character like Kai, who already has such like an interesting storyline and stuff, really popping in comparison to like Damon, who once you get to the later seasons, like he feels very one-dimensional because they're not giving him anything to do and he hasn't changed and they're regressing him. So now you've got like new guy over here who's like in the moment, shot to shot, being really fun in a way that not everybody else is doing. And he just like, how do I look at anything else? I don't know how to pay attention when he's on screen. I'm just looking at him. And I feel very validated in those thoughts, because at the con I went to, Chris B like gushed about him and like said he was so fun to work with because he's so like in the moment and he's always like having so much fun shot to shot. Those are the characters that I always end up loving the most. Like, you know, that's why so many of us love Loki, because Tom is a theater actor and it shows. Let's talk about how, in the grand scheme of the show, right? Like, a lot of our men, especially, are really dealing with stuff that needs to be studied. And the only person that ever seems to really bring that up is Camille. And she does her best, but she is only one girl. But then you have Kai, right? And he like looks you in the eye and is like, oh no, I know exactly what's wrong with me. Nice to meet you, I'm a sociopath. And it's like, damn, at least you know. At least you're giving us up front what we're gonna get from you. Because everybody else is like, I'm fine, nothing's wrong with me, and then like murders a whole village of people on Christmas. Like, one thing I find really interesting where Kai's involved is just like the differences between like psychopath brains and sociopath brains, and like the wiring and how stuff shakes out differently. Because antisocial personality disorder, like as a spectrum, you know, there's levels of severity in the symptoms, and you can kind of have more of one, less of another. You don't have to tick every single box, you know, it's a spectrum. Typically you're going off of symptoms that are like excessive aggression, especially like when things don't go the way they want, manipulative behavior, excessive charm in order to manipulate, difficulty maintaining relationships, and then impulsivity, which a lot of times is like, well, I wanted it, so yeah, I just took it. What are you talking about? I did what I needed to do to get it. But then like where psychopaths are concerned, they tend to like not care about anybody, like themselves only, and they don't see anybody else as anything of value. They have such a non-existent level of empathy that like they simply just do not perceive the world that way. Like what they want is all that matters, and that is it at the end of the day. This is why I have issues with like Damon and Klaus, because they so often treat Caroline and Elena as objects. And like Klaus is a little different because he can be really, really caring towards Caroline in a way that Damon struggles with even on his good days, right? And this is coming from somebody that loves them. So this is not me hating on them. I'm just telling you that like the behavior that they exhibit in the show, in the script, wild sometimes. Like how many times did Damon kill Jeremy? I thought you broke my heart, so I ripped out Aaron's neck. Okay? And like, again, this isn't a hard and fast rule. It applies differently to things. But typically, sociopaths will have a certain group of people that they care for. And that might be just one person. Like it might be a sibling, a parent, a friend, a partner. But typically they'll attach to like a certain group of people and they'll be like, you guys matter in a way that is different from how these people matter because I don't care about them at all. Feel literally nothing for those people over there. You though, like something's happening in my brain when I look at you. And I think canonically that's very obviously true of Kai. Like when he says things like, I had a soft spot for one of my sisters, talking about Joe, and the infinitely more awful, he kept fighting me. And I was like, I saved you for last, you ungrateful little, about drowning Joey in the pool. That's what he's telling us, right? Like attachment level to the family, very low. Attachment to Joe and Joey, pretty high, all things considered. Like in his mind, that was him being kind to them, at least significantly kinder than he was to the other ones. Doesn't make it good, right? But that's what that means. That's what he's explaining. And it's still showing us like his inability to like fathom them not seeing things the way he did, which just further proves like that inherent like narcissism. Like I know why I'm doing this. You should know why I'm doing this too. Like Joey, relax. Also, the note of like pre-merge connection with Joe, I think again, like I mentioned in her section, he was banking on her fixing him. Pre-merge, 1994 Kai, everything is just so twisted up in his head at that point, and there's all these like confusing emotions and confusing feelings. The way they've been raised has screwed up all of them, right? And then he's dealing with sociopathy on top of all of that. That has made him like repressed and muted. And one of the only emotions that comes out, you know, quote unquote normally is anger. And even then it's like so explosive and volatile. He doesn't have a grasp on like actual love at that point, right? So I think it's very easy to assume that like those feelings that he had for her, where it's like her magic is his magic, very like possessive, and like assuming that he's owed that from her. Like, you're my twin. Of course you're supposed to love and care about me. You're supposed to want me to be better, Joe. Give me your magic and make me better. And we see it later too, right? Like where they're in the hospital having that argument when he's sick and he's just like, actually, this makes perfect sense. I was supposed to get your magic all along. Give it to me right now. I think when the OG merge goes to shit, it's really easy to see like why he would blow up at Joe, because like she's his twin. More than that, they're Gemini twins. Like they are supposed to merge and be together forever. How dare she not want to do that with him? What are you talking about? That's the whole point of us being born. That's the destiny we have. Like, what are you don't get to believe me. You can't leave me. Like, it's one thing for the rest of the family to hate him, but she is literally supposed to be half of him. And he's still not good enough for her. As much as I can see her being like, well, I don't really mind that he needs to siphon me, like in the beginning, like when they're kids, and kind of feeling like, if I can help, like, why wouldn't I do that? I can see him growing resentful and being like, yeah, if you can help, why don't you? Like, you need to be giving it to me so that I feel better, Joe, and being really manipulative and like awful about it. And there had to be a point where she stopped saying yes, right? And then that leaves it up to like, how did she stop saying yes? Because he can just take it, like he doesn't have to ask permission first. Gets real funky and sad the longer you think about it, you know? Some wild lore that we never really do anything with in canon is that Joe and Bonnie quite literally end up with matching scars from Kai, like physical matching scars from him. that is insane. Like, forget the bachelorette party scenes. Like, I need them to have a conversation AA meeting style about Kai. Like, that is what I would pay to watch. Like, why didn't they discuss him at some point? We never see Bonnie looking at Joe and going, hey man, your brother sucks. Also, they're twins, so you're telling me that, like, there's no level of Bonnie being like, I don't know if I can, like, look at Joe anymore. I don't know if I can be around her anymore, especially given the similarities that they have. They have such similar humor styles, and I'm like, you're telling me that there's not something about Joe that triggers Bonnie at least a little bit? That should have been in canon. Why didn't we didn't even touch it once. We didn't even sort of discuss it. It's like it didn't happen. It's like it's not real, but it is. He loves to be like, I'm not sentimental. I don't get attached to anything. I hate everybody. And then the second these two do anything that even sort of implies that maybe they're betraying him, that man's crashing out so fast. Look at the look on his face in 94 when he realizes that he can't feel Joe's magic and she has lied to him. I don't even think that this moment is him being upset about, like, losing and, like, being tricked. I think it's more so, what do you mean you tricked me? Huh? That doesn't happen. I mean, narcissistically, like, he can't believe she would get away with it. But also, I think there's just straight up, like, pain and confusion over her wanting to trick him at all. Like, what do you mean? Same thing with Bonnie in 1903. That is the face of a man who's like, what do you mean you're stabbing me in the back and leaving me here? I apologized to you. I said I was sorry. I thought I got it right this time. So once you start, like, understanding that about Kai, that, like, he really is gonna have some level of attachment to a certain group of people, it becomes really hard to pretend like the post-merge scenes with Joe and Bonnie aren't truthful on some level. Firm believer, I don't think he stops being sociopathic post-merge, right? Like, let me say that right now. I don't think that the merge rewires his brain into, like, quote-unquote normalcy. I think he is still sociopathic. I think Luke, like, fills in the gaps in his psyche, so suddenly he's sociopathic and he can feel empathy. Mind frick if I've ever seen one, but that's how I view it. So he's always gonna be struggling and, like, walking the line of, like, selfishness and selflessness and, like, why am I doing this thing that I want to do? Am I apologizing to Joe because I feel bad and I want my sister back, or am I apologizing to Joe so that she'll forgive me and then I won't have to feel guilty anymore? Why do I want to talk to Bonnie so much? Do I actually like Bonnie? Because I've been lying and saying I didn't like Bonnie, even though we all know I liked Bonnie in the beginning, okay? And it is selfish. Like, his apology to Bonnie is far more selfish than his apology to Joe. I think it's very interesting that he knows better than to go to Joe in person and he's like, I wrote a letter, somebody give it to her, I just need her to know it's important to me. But even that is selfish. Like, what he is saying in those moments is like, I need her to know. It's important to me that she understands how I feel. Like, he can't look at it from her side. The best he can do is be like, I'm not gonna go give her the letter because that would suck. She doesn't want to see me right now. But then with Bonnie, he's like, I have to go talk to her. I need to see her again. And then forces Bonnie into seeing him in quite possibly, like, the worst situation. I'm like, you could have just had Damon go get her and you stay in the Salvatore living room where there's not, you know, an overwhelming crowd of people. But he's selfish and he can't, like, he literally, like, I don't think he can think past that. Do I think he could have grown to that point? Yeah, but I think he was gonna struggle with it forever, no matter what. What I wouldn't give to see that little gap from, like, post-merge to him showing up at the Salvatore house with the letter for Joe, because I just know my man was a distressed mess, crying in the streets, having little breakdowns in the shower, and I wanted to be there for it. I should have gotten to see that, okay? Why else do you think I'm here? I would just have paid money to watch him trip over himself to come to terms with all these new, even more confusing things he's feeling. And I think it's so telling that, like, top of the list for him is Joe. Like, she is the most important person in his life, and she has been their whole lives. It's exactly how Luke and Liv feel about each other. It's just that Joe and Kai's connection is all muddled up and funky. It's still there, though. Listen, I'm a firm believer that when he says have a good life, sissy, and he walks out, he means it. I personally don't think he would have messed with her again, except in the context of, like, giving it a year or two and then being like, I have no one else to call at Christmas. Can I please come over for dinner? I am so lonely. Oh my God. Do I think he would have killed the girls? Nah, fam, I don't think that the Kai that we're seeing post-merge would have done that. And that's considering the deleted scene where he's like, I'm so mad at you for moving on and having a life without me and like leaving me in the prison world to rot. I hate you for that. Even with those feelings, I don't think he would have messed with them, because I think he reaches a point where he's like, I know I screwed up, right? You are mad at me. That is what it is. But she's not in the coven anymore. She gives up her Gemini magic and she's not in the coven. She stops being his responsibility and his problem. Like, he doesn't have to deal with her anymore. And if she wants him to go, he can go. The thing with the twins is that Joe doesn't want to be a witch. So if he's coven leader and it's his job to like control everybody, even if the girls are Geminis, he doesn't have to bring them into the coven. Like, if Joe doesn't want to be part of the coven, the girls don't have to be part of the coven. There's no reason for them to have to merge because she doesn't want them to merge. And she brings up, you know, like fear with Rick, where she's like, if we're not careful, like my family's going to come after them. The coven's going to want them. They're going to force them to merge. Kai's not going to let that happen. And I don't think he would kill them to stop it from happening. Like, I think he just would kill the other people. He'd be like, leave my nieces alone. And it's not even that I think he would be like lovey-dovey about it, like, you know, feeling affection for the girls and that's why he's protecting them. I think he would just be like, no, like, I'm staying leader until I'm done being leader, and Joe doesn't want to be part of the coven anymore, leave her alone. They have a literal psychic connection to each other. He would know that she has no desire to see the girls grow up in the coven, to see the girls merge. She wouldn't even have to tell him, like, he would just know that. So like in another life where they don't retcon the merge lore and have him go back to being evil, crazy uncle, I just think he lets them live because he knows they're not a threat. Like, there's no reason to be worried about them. Other Gemini twins in the coven, yeah, maybe he needs to worry about them, but like specifically the Saltzman twins, they're not a threat. And that could have been really cool, because just imagine a world where like when he says goodbye to Joe, he really does just like bounce for a while. And we get to keep her, right? And so she's raising the girls and she's kind of nervous, like looking over her shoulder all the time. At some point, either the Geminis are gonna come or Kai's gonna come, because he tells her like, you're pregnant, you're gonna have a baby. And she doesn't know if he knows that it's twins or not. He does. How would he not? So then her and Rick are just sort of like trying their best, living maybe still in Whitmore, like trying to raise the girls. Everything's a mess. People start coming after them and they just start dropping like flies. Yet that's strange because Damon is now a human, and like Stefan says he's not eating people because he can't. Who's killing these people? Surprise, coven leader uncle. Like, that would have been so great. That would have been so great. And it would have been such an easy way to like bring him back without the mess of bringing him back that we actually got. I have to believe that on some level, had things shaken out differently, the only person she could have gone to for help regarding the twins would have been him. So again, there's just that like amazing possibility of like, say he left, say he apologized to Joe and Bonnie, and then he dipped off back to Portland or wherever the hell he wants to go deal with the coven nonsense, and sort of like bubbled that away from everybody else for a little while. Maybe we don't see him for a hot minute. The girls are gonna have problems. We know that. I personally don't think she would have dealt with it well. I think she's dealing with her own biases. She's dealing with memories and like PTSD on what she went through being Kai's twin, and now she's got two of them. So I feel like that would compound for her, but just like a parallel world where she's forced to call him and be like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Don't want to do this wrong. Really don't want to screw them up the way mom and dad screwed you up. Would love some advice. And the smugness. Jesus. At the end of the freaking day, it is just a linking spell. I know you guys know how to unlink him from them. Immortal Coven leader goes so hard. Then we have the point of like, no one ever needs to merge again. But that's impossible. We can't make that work, whatever. Maybe he doesn't turn in this parallel universe, right? At the time of Lizzie and Josie becoming 22, theoretically, age-wise, he's still good to go. There's no reason for them to have to merge. So I don't know if that fact alone would negate and it would pass down to like whoever is going to be the next set of twins. Unfortunately, that leaves the door open for like, is he having kids with somebody? Did he have a set of twins? Because probably then they'd become the heirs if they're obviously younger than Josie and Lizzie. There are so many loopholes in this damn show. You're telling me that this man and Bonnie can't figure it out? they would have cracked the curse. Like, the curse would have been broken. We've never had to do another merge, okay? Had we just let them sit and talk about it for a little while. Man, I'm losing light and it's getting so cold. Like, I'm starting to like shiver while I'm standing here talking. It's like in the negatives in Chicago right now, so I'm having a great time. I still have, just in the Kai section, like 7 more pages. So I'm gonna go. I'll see you guys again tomorrow. You're not gonna know, it'll be a couple seconds. Hope you have a great night's sleep. Day 3, we're back. And then in the case of like helping with Bonnie on her birthday, like he does that partially because Damon like baits him into it and is like, it's really bad being over there alone. You know that really well, don't you? But it triggers all these emotions in him and he's like, yeah, I do actually, it does suck. And like, damn, it's her birthday, maybe I should do something. And so he's still mad at Bonnie, right? Like there's still anger there, but he agrees to help. And not only does he agree to help, y'all, he goes above and beyond. He is like bleeding out. He tells Jeremy, I'm half dead. And Jeremy's like, we have to get Bonnie out, do the spell. And he's like, yo, okay. And covered in sweat, covered in blood, super unwell, does the spell again anyway, to the point where he passes out mid doing it, like because he's bleeding out on the kitchen floor in the Salvatore house, and Damon has to like frantically give him blood to wake him up and then like save Jeremy because they're both gonna get stuck over there. He warned them that could happen in the beginning. He's like, if you overwhelm me, Gemini coven leader or not, I can only take so many people across. And if it goes wrong, we'll just all be stuck somewhere forever. Maybe over there with Bonnie, maybe in the ether, who's to say? And that's what happens to him and Jeremy, right? Like they manage to save Bonnie. Jeremy's the one that clicks the door to open the garage and save Bonnie from committing, but it's Kai's magic allowing him to do that. Now again, Julie, if that wasn't supposed to feel like passing the torch from one boyfriend to another, what was it supposed to feel like? How was I supposed to take it that Jeremy, who hates Kai on sight, is the one to be like, actually, he's the only one who seems to be willing to help me. He's the only one that seems to get how important this is, and he's the only one listening. So I will work with him, and I will stop Liv from killing him, and you know what? Maybe I don't hate him as much as I thought I did. Julie, how was I supposed to interpret that? You need to get it together because you're dropping breadcrumbs that you then tell me later I should never have put together. Why did you drop them? Where were they leading if not to Bon Kai? And I do think he would have just gone in and got her, right? Or sent one of them to go in and get her the same way that Liv did with Damon and Elena. Had the Ascendant been working properly, I think he would have just been like, let's just get her out, fine, even though he was mad. Because their whole arc is retaliatory. I've mentioned that in the siphon thing, but everything between Kai and Bonnie is like back and forth retaliation. So he was mad at her. He was annoyed that she didn't want to pick him and like him because nobody ever does. And so that sucked because I think even pre-merge, he has like an attachment and a fascination to her that he can't shake. And I bet that drives him crazy, right? Like, I bet that gets on his nerves that he thinks she's so pretty, that he thinks she's so nice. Those don't make sense to him. He shouldn't feel that way. And yet I'm a firm believer that even with how messy the rave apology scene is, like, I think in his mind, he genuinely views that as like, we're even now. And it's the same kind of thing where like Joe tells him like, I want you out of my life, leave me alone once we're done with this. And he agrees and leaves her. Bonnie says, if I see you again, I'll melt your face off. I absolutely think he was gonna keep messing with her. But as far as we know, he did leave her alone until she came to get him to drag him into 1903. He hadn't messed with her. I feel like Bonnie would have told us had he gone to see her and stuff. Like, I think he was letting it lie for at least a little while. I don't think he would have been able to last very long. Like, I think he would have shown up again and been like, please don't, like, you know you like my face, let's just not melt it. Let's melt maybe my arm. You want to burn my arm? That's fine, that could be hot. But I just think he thought like she'll be angry for a little while and then she'll get over it. Like, Bonnie always gets over it. He even says that to Damon, where he's like, she always comes back. Like, even when she's really, really mad at you, she always comes back. That's his impression of her. I just don't think he thought they would fight forever. I think he thought, we're finally even, this is finally over, and slowly but surely I will be able to wear her down if I'm just patient. And he's not patient. Luke's in his head laughing at him when he has that thought. Like, sure, bro. But in 1903, y'all, he wears gloves. He wears gloves, and he's the only one that wears gloves in that scene. And you can't tell me that that didn't have symbolic meaning. He is quite literally hiding his hands from her because he knows that he's hurt her with them, and he knows that they freak her out. When he's trying to like get through to her and she's ignoring him and he snaps and grabs her and pulls her in, he's immediately like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm so sorry. He didn't even siphon her in that moment, but he registers now the level of PTSD that she's got with that, and specifically like around his hands and his power. So he knows, like, dang it, I messed up. I should not have done that. Big mistake. So sorry. Please forgive me. And again, she shuts him down and is like, actually, you just suck. Like, you're just always gonna suck. The old you's always gonna be in you, and you're always gonna be terrible. And then he's left being like, maybe, but I'm trying so hard, Bon, and I feel like I'm spelling out the obvious here, right? But you have to remember that until like a month before this, his brain just wasn't wired this way. Like, he didn't register these things. He never would have cared before that she was scared. So even just that moment of him being like, Bonnie, I'm sorry, like, I didn't mean to do that, and pulling away from her and like holding his hands back and being like, that was not what I meant to do. That's huge. That's huge. And that tells me that the merge worked. Like, when she attacks him, my man is on his back going, Bonnie, what are you doing? Confused as all hell because they weren't supposed to be fighting anymore. In his mind, this part was over. They were moving forward into like, she's still kind of mad at me, but we're not fighting anymore. He's operating under the impression that she knows he helped her on her birthday. Why would he do that if he wanted her dead? He had an opportunity in that moment to just let her die, and he didn't. But she doesn't know that. Nobody told her. And so here I am 10 years later making this video because it will never not be crazy to me that they thought it was believable to have him not even remotely fight back in 1903, right? He doesn't even attempt to grab her. Even just physical strength. We know that Kai is like bigger than Bonnie. Like, he could have so easily gotten that knife out of her hand. He could have just grabbed her knee. She's like not straddling him, but she's very close to him in that moment. He could have just put his hand on her leg and started siphoning her, and she would have collapsed. But he doesn't fight back at all. He just lays there with his hands up. When she goes to like killing blow him, then he runs away. And you're telling me that he just stews in that for a little bit and then comes out ready for blood. Like, if you wanted me to believe that, you should have shown me conversations with the heretics where they like hyped him up about needing to get rid of her or needing to get rid of the coven. Like, because on one hand, that would make sense to me. If you told me that he was in there with them for months and they were sort of like re-brainwashing him and like going back over everything they've been through, and he was confronted with like centuries of the abuse they've all endured, and then he came back and was like, yeah, this can't be fixed. I should just like go rogue and start over completely because this is never gonna work. I would maybe believe that. But as far as what you showed me canonically, right, where he's at in this moment in 1903, a way more in character reaction would have been like, I stabbed you and left you in 94. You stabbed me and left me in 03. Can we be done now, please, Bonnie? I'm so tired. We're already here. Let's just talk about the Red Wedding retcon, because if there's one thing that infuriates me about this damn show, it's those last 2 episodes in season 6. Dear God. It just, on principle, makes no sense, right? Because the way the merge works, you got 2 twins coming together, new person. We've been shown, I've explained some examples, that like Luke was clearly influencing Kai. There was a change in Kai that happened post the merge with Luke. You cannot just pretend like none of that happened and now suddenly make me believe that he's 100% in control. He's back to his old tricks. He never changed. It was all a lie. I don't believe you. Logistically, I know why they did what they did. Candace, who plays Caroline, was pregnant. They needed that to fit into the storyline. And just ignoring the fact that there's so many ways that you can like film around that, you know? They just were like, we have to make her the one that the babies go into. Ignoring the fact that the clear, obvious answer to if anybody was gonna have that happen to them, there was only ever one person that made sense for arc-wise. But sure, let's make her the main character moving forward. Why not? I'll never get past the fact that you've shown me these moments where Kai is clearly different. Almost more importantly, you've proven to me that the merge worked and Luke is somehow either mixed with him or influencing him one way or another. The merge was successful. They are connected now forever. Now you want me to believe that Luke suddenly isn't able to sway him from getting rid of the entire coven, men, women, children, their sisters. He can't control that anymore. Kai's just too powerful and his evil brain is too strong, and he took over in that moment and did what he wanted to do. No. And on what planet, character-wise, does he happily give up the ability to draw from the entire coven? You wanted me to believe that he was so obsessed with power that it was essentially a character trait for him, right? The merge, becoming leader, that is all he's ever wanted. And suddenly he's okay with throwing it away, giving up on all of that power, and only ever being able to draw from himself. They want us to believe that him transitioning cuts off his connection from the coven entirely, stops it from being a thing, they get wiped out entirely, and he is starting over alone, no longer the Gemini coven leader. There is no Gemini coven to be led, except the twins are still alive, so there is, and the curse continues. In his mind, he's wiping them out entirely and starting over alone. If that's true, there's no world where he does that. I'm just supposed to believe he was willing to give all that up for Fangs? Because he's not even starting over with the heretics, right? You didn't even try to imply that and then have Daemon still kill him and get rid of him and have the heretics be like, oh, guess that's not gonna happen. There was no implication that he even wanted to be with them instead. It was literally just him stopping the coven from existing and theoretically like leaving. What was he gonna do? You didn't even give him like a plan of what's next, right? Was he gonna stay and terrorize the Mystic Falls people as a heretic? If it was just slightly realistic, maybe I could wrap my head around it a little bit better, but it's not. It's so stupid, and it gets rid of so many people and so many plot lines for nothing. There's no payoff to doing this. This was just a bad decision all around. Also, the amount of control that he has as a newbie heretic, unparalleled levels. And when you think about what they want us to believe about him, it starts to fall apart even more, because they go around being like, he's crazy and homicidal and a maniac and he's a spree killer, blah, 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 blah. And that's how they want us to feel, right? And then they have him transition in a room full of people. His father is there, like source of abuse, source of hatred, has been talking about destroying him the whole time we've known him. What does he do? He drags him closer, he swipes his finger through the blood on his cheek and licks that off, and that's how he transitions. He does not bite him. He does not tear him to pieces, which is all I wanted. When I found out he was going to turn, like when it became clear that like one way or another we're getting Kai with fangs, I was like, I better get to see him shred Joshua. If that's what this is coming to, it better end there. I better get to witness it, and it better be so cathartic and amazing. No, he bleeds out on the floor at his feet, which in its own way is great, but I think that speaks to a version of Kai that they don't want us to believe in anymore. Like, what do you mean he doesn't rampage through the room, killing everybody as they're dying? What do you mean he doesn't attack Rick the second he sees him with Joe's body outside? What do you mean that he wanders through a hospital bitten from Tyler, so he's delusional and hallucinating from werewolf venom, and he doesn't kill anybody in the hospital? In fact, he goes back to the church all on his own, doesn't kill anybody on the way there either. He goes back to the church, stumbles in and goes, anybody still alive? I need blood. And then Bonnie freaking Bennett walks in seconds after he's just said that. She starts teasing and tormenting him. They get into a fight, and he doesn't even attempt to bite her. This woman that he's been obsessed with since they met, he doesn't even try it. He doesn't even think about it. No, he just casually siphons the venom out of himself, and then they continue fighting, and she's bleeding out on the floor in front of him, and he goes across the room and sits down and just watches her bleed out. Sure, okay. Like, do y'all know what Kai's body count is at the top of season 6? 4. And I'm not saying that's not awful, right? Considering who these people are. I am just saying that that's the number that we're working with. By the like merge point, we're maybe at like 8, confirmed for sure, the taxi driver and the grill manager. You could sort of consider Liz Forbes, I don't. And then I think maybe 1 or 2 of the kids that he attacked to get to Joe in the hospital that moment. I don't think all of them made it necessarily. But the highest I will go pre-Red Wedding is 10. And that's pushing it for me. So everyone around him, right, on screen, we're bombarded with people being like, he's a spree killer, he's a homicidal maniac, he'll kill you for getting his Burger King order wrong. Like, maybe he would. Maybe pre-merge he would. But I'm just telling you that you didn't show me that. All you did was show me every single thing he does. Awful, awful things. Every single one of them has like a clear reason behind it. And the same cannot be said for the other men in the show. So therefore I'm just left feeling like, well, at least I know why he did it. And again, I'm not saying that like it makes sense to me or you, right? Like that's not rationally what we would maybe think of to do in a situation, but I'm left feeling like I understand him perfectly and all he's doing is what needs to be done situation to situation to get to what he wants. Very clear and easy to follow. His rationales make sense in a way that cannot be said for characters like Klaus and Damon, who just seem to do truly whatever they want at any given moment without thought of consequence. He doesn't even really feel deranged to me until that moment on the steps in front of the Salvatore house in 1903. That's the moment where I was like, oh, we've done something here. Something's happened. But even then, that's with the retcon of the merge lore, right? Like that's them going against stuff that they've already done and shown us to get him to this point. If they had done more to explain it to me and to tell me how he got to that point from February to June, maybe I'd believe it easier, but they didn't. They just have him disappear and then come back and be like, surprise, I'm evil again. And it's like, babe, how'd we get here? He had time to kill all of them the way that Luke and Joshua were saying he would. That's like the whole issue with him merging with Joe. Everybody's like, the second he's leader, he's gonna turn on us and kill all of us. That's why they don't want him to do it. They're afraid that he's so unhinged and unstable that as leader, he will just wipe them out. But then he merges with Luke in late December and doesn't do anything for months. He's out and about dealing with his rewired brain, trying to apologize and make things right with Joe and Bonnie. And he makes it to late February with only getting into a fight with Liv. And the only reason he fights with her is because she attacks him first. And then when he can't kill her, it's not like he goes back on that and goes after her again. She supposedly just leaves. We see her like wake up in bed after Tyler brought her home. So she's alive. Kai didn't follow her back to the school and attack her again. He just left and left her alone. And as far as we know, she just goes off back to Portland and cuts her hair and comes back for the wedding in June. Like when he woke up and was like, oh, you win some, you lose some, except for me, I always win. Joe was on the ground. She's holding Luke's dead body in her arms. He could have killed them right then, but he didn't. Like, you can't do this. You can't write him one way and show us these situations and visuals that add up to this version of him over here and then be like, no, this is who he always is. This is who he always will be. This is the only version of him that matters. Like, it just doesn't work that way. If you want me to believe it, you have to make it match. Why is he still hung up on Bonnie in season 8? Why is he still hung up on Bonnie in Legacies? Make up your minds. Is he the devil himself or is he a troubled man? Because you cannot keep getting away with him being both as if we don't see the inconsistencies. Like, this is exhausting. I know I said before that I would love to see like his reaction to like dealing with like all the like bombarding of feelings he was getting and like all of those emotions and things coming out for the first time. But what I really needed was a moment of him realizing he has magic for the first time in his life. Because when he leaves the merge with Luke, right, when he goes into the merge, he's slightly juiced up from having siphoned the vampire stuff out of Liz, right? And so he goes into that, he merges with Luke. There's a chance that post that, he didn't realize what had happened and he just assumed, well, it'll fade. It always fades. And then it didn't. And I bet it felt different to suddenly be like, wait a second. Is this mine? Like, oh, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. That's why I love him so much. Those are the things I needed. And you guys just didn't give me any of them. He has no idea what that feels like. I probably think that they do know, like, well, when I take magic from you, then I have it and it works for me and that's what matters. But there's a difference. Like, there's an inherent difference in like taking it and converting it and using it for yourself and it being in you and coming from you. And we never get to, he says it, he says like, you know, I got his ability to do magic, it's great, but he never goes into detail on like what that feels like. I want to know, babe. Tell me. I've seen an opinion float around in fandom before where people will be like, his trauma must not have been that bad because he's like joking about it and he's like being silly and he kind of downplays it and stuff. And I'm like, well, you just said it right there. He's downplaying it. Cause like, I fear I cannot disagree with you more, right? Like when I watched the show for the first time and he has that moment where he's like, my parents called me an abomination. I guess that hurt my feelings. That was when I started listening. I was like, bet. So that really screwed you up, huh? Are you gonna fill me in on how badly? And he did a little bit. Obviously, everyone's experiences are different, but me personally, I stay coping with humor. In my friend group, that's a natural response to our traumas. That is how we communicate. And also, here's the thing, right? You want him to be making jokes. Because the second this man locks in on whatever atrocity he's willing to commit on that certain day, it's over for you, bud. By the time he stops being goofy, it is too late. On that note, we all register that his personality is essentially a mask, right? Like 9 times out of 10, my boy is masking or mimicking to get through a situation. We very rarely see how he's actually feeling, right? But there are these moments that Chris gives us acting-wise where it's like little cracks in the mask, and I just feed off of those. I see them and I'm like, that was your lying face. That was your actual lying face. I clocked it. We see lots of little moments too where like when he attempts honesty, like in the moment with Bonnie in 1903, and people brush him off because they're like, you're lying. You have to be lying. His knee-jerk reaction is always rage because it's like, why even try? Like, why am I even attempting this when no one cares? You just think like I'm never gonna get any better, and therefore I probably won't because it doesn't seem to matter what I do, it's never enough. Pre-merge though, there's that whole chunk of scenes like after Bonnie sends Damon away and it's just Kai and Bonnie in the prison world. I'm not gonna say he's trying to get her to like genuinely like him, right? He doesn't genuinely like her in those moments. He is manipulating her, whether he wants to or not. That's what he's doing, is like mouse-trapping her into like thinking he's okay and thinking she can trust him because he knows he needs her to get out. And I do think on some level, like he would have taken her with him. Just lie, Bonnie. You're good at lying. You've done it before. Just pretend, because I think if she had, he would have taken her with him. And I don't think like they would have stayed together outside of the prison world. Like instantly they would have been fighting again, right? But I think when he said like, we can leave together, like I just want you to get me out, he was not lying. That was not a lie. He just wanted to go home and go wreak havoc on his own. But there's these moments like when they're sitting in the living room where he is trying so hard and he's pulling out like every trick he knows. So he's like, let me be nice, right? People are nice. I can ask how she's feeling, and right, I did shoot you with an arrow, cool. So you shot that one down. Puzzles. Bonnie, you love puzzles. I love puzzles. Let's put the Ascendant back together, okay? It can be a bonding experience. Ooh, you don't like that either, okay? What if I just siphon you, you stupid little... And it's funny. It's funny to watch him go from like, I can be nice, I can pretend, no I can't. Jesus, no I can't. I can be funny. I'm funny. Nope, that's not good enough either. What if? My personal opinion of him is that he is in no way confident, right? I think he's wildly insecure. I think he knows he is a competent witch that has never been able to show that and prove that to people. Okay, that I do think is true. I think he's aware that he's talented and good at being a witch, and I think he knows he would be good at being leader, but everybody has like snuffed that out in him and it's become this like twisted thing. But like when Joe tells them it made him feel like a freak, she means that. She knows that. That link between them means that she is fully aware that that's how he actually feels. So much of what the other, like the heretics go through is like violent stuff, like violent abuse. I think Joshua Parker is absolutely the kind of man that disciplines with violence, and so for me, I'm like, that goes above spanking and into like punishing them with spells and stuff. I don't feel like they could get away with stringing him up from meat hooks in the garage, right? But they abuse him by like isolating him. And again, there's two sides to it, where it's like Joe says he did it himself, Kai says no, they made me that way. They wouldn't let me touch anybody because they didn't trust me. Like, they isolated me and treated me like shit and then threw me here when I snapped. We know that like their magic starts developing from like the 3 to 5 range, right? And essentially we're led to believe that like he's been dealing with this from the time that him and Joe's magic started to develop, and they realized, oh, Joe's normal and Kai seems to be a siphon. That sucks, he's cursed. I'm under the impression that the no touching rule was pretty immediate, right? And so obviously they had to like care for him at least a little bit, because you can't do that to toddlers, but I don't think they were physically affectionate with him. I think all of that stopped almost instantly when they realized like something was wrong. And I do think he still had Joe, at least in the beginning, for like a not insignificant amount of time. But the other kids start being born really quickly. And then you've got all the aspects of like a big family. He's already being forgotten and like pushed to the side, but then it's just getting worse as more kids keep being born and the parents keep getting busier and busier and busier. I've seen people say before too that like regarding the deleted scene, they feel like Kai is lying when he says to Joe, you know, I'd like to live because I didn't get to do a lot of that before everybody decided that I wasn't worth it. And I guess like technically on one hand, it's like, sure, like if he had just not snapped, theoretically, they were just gonna let him and Joe not merge and just like go on to do whatever they wanted. But you have to remember, I think, that like at that point, the only thing he has is the merge. Like the only thing he has looked forward to his entire life has been merging, because again, as far as we know, he didn't know they weren't gonna let him merge until May 9th. Why else would he put up with all of that? Like, he is stronger than Joshua. Joshua's the coven leader, sure. If Kai touches him, he can take all of that magic. So it's like, why stay in the house? Why put up with all of this nonsense? Why put up with these rules? Why allow them to mistreat you? Unless all you were focusing on is getting to 22 and doing the thing that you know you're supposed to do. I'm gonna touch on Legacy's Kai because I said I would stand by him, and so we have to talk about it, but like I don't know him as well. He's so hot. He looks so good in Legacies. I don't know him. For those of you that don't know, right, Legacies follows the kids of the TVD universe at the school that Rick starts with Caroline and Klaus's money. Kai shows up through another loophole. He gets out of the prison world that Bonnie left him in. And first things first, right, for some reason, Rick has the ascendant. That already doesn't make any sense, right? You're telling me Bonnie gave that up? No, that thing's under Bonnie's pillow. So as far as I'm concerned, right off the bat, you're giving me incorrect lore. The ascendant's with Rick, and he makes the brilliant decision to drop these 3 troubled teens into the prison world with Kai. Yeah, let that sink in. They're teenagers, right? And they did a horrible thing. It's so much more complicated than that, but like an accident that is really bad happens, people die, and Rick is like, I can't control them, I'm putting them in the prison world. And another teacher has to agree to that because it's not Bonnie. Bonnie doesn't know that that happened. Let me make that very clear, because it would not have had he asked her opinion. These 3 kids get put into this prison world with Kai, and when we see him again, canonically, he is in like a weird relationship. It's not a relationship. He's sleeping with one of them. I'm gonna put him on the screen for you, okay? We have a male werewolf who is not Luke's type, a POC witch who loves to play with fire, and then a white vampire. Now, which one do you think, based off of everything you know about Kai Parker, who do you think he has the relationship with? Did you pick the white vampire? This is gross across the board, right? Because Jade is in a 17-year-old body, and I Julie, you gotta stop doing that. He was one of the only men to make it out of the TVDU without an inappropriate relationship, and then you go and do that. Side note, I can't stand this obsession that they seem to have with making the vampire bodies minors. Like, that is so gross to me. These are teenagers, and this is a grown man, and I fear that that fact is not sticking for you, Julie, and I don't know what we need to do to get that through your head, but like, oh my God, enough. And it gets worse because later on, Josie and Jade have a thing too. Ew! I gotta, no. I really will twist anything to make myself feel even just a little bit better, because once I sat with the horrible truth of this for a minute, I was like, well, he picked the humanity off vampire child because she can never feel anything for him. It will never be anything more than just weird Hunger Games hookups. Oh, God. Will I ever finish this video? I don't know, but I forgot to tell you that the two things that I find most important about Kai in Legacies, it's a mess, right? He's still hung up on Bonnie. I mentioned it in passing, but he still, every time she's referenced, he gets this like dazed, just like, oh yeah, Bonnie Bennett look on his face. You know the look he makes when he thinks about Bonnie. So that's still happening in Legacies, right? And then also, you can say what you want about how he feels about the twins, because obviously he did try to kill them in season 8. So we know that, like, it's not like he's warm and fuzzy Uncle Felix, okay? By any means, that's not what's happening here. When he says goodbye to Josie, dear God, yeah, you're looking at him. He does the exact same thing as when he says goodbye to Joe. Can't tell me that didn't, you can't, I know I've made it really clear that, like, I love Chris Wood, but, like, my man, you trying to kill me? I have seen a handful of things of like Chris talking about Kai too, right? And I know that there's like an impression that he definitely liked him in season 6 the most too, which makes sense to me, because I'm like, if you're delving into him, that's where he's the most consistent, and then it just gets real messy as the shows go along. Not to bring HP into this, but I did see a thing where he said, you know, Kai would be in Slytherin, and I remember like pausing the clip and being like, baby, you know his whole thing was like stepping on people without magic, right? Like if you drop 11-year-old Kai Parker into Slytherin house, he is getting jumped on night 1. He's not invited to the Death Eater meetings, honey. He's getting locked in the broom closet at Quidditch practice. Okay, like Joe maybe would be fine. Kai needs to be in Hufflepuff. Their dorms are by the kitchens. Also, have you ever seen a badger angry? Yeah. There was definitely this like shift where if you watch clips of them talking about everything, like I feel like Chris shipped Kai and Bonnie, or at least like saw it the way that we all saw it. And then when everything went to shit, there was obviously other obligations going on. And so there's like a shift in like, no, he's crazy. Everybody knows he's crazy. And now that they're doing cons where they're not affiliated with the creators anymore, he's back to being like, it would have been great had his parents loved him a little more, because, you know, I'm not saying it was their fault, but I am saying maybe they had a little bit more responsibility for him and they just sort of didn't help at all. And I love to see it. I'm like, thank you, because that validates for me that like he knows where we're coming from when we say we love him. I don't like being made to feel like I should feel bad for caring about him as much as I do, because the reality of his story, how am I not supposed to sympathize with him? Like, come on. In conclusion, he's my favorite boy. He did everything and nothing wrong. Cannot change my mind. This is the hill I will happily die on. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Back to what I was saying hours ago about the inconsistencies with the Red Wedding and them and Joe dying / not dying. Basically, the timeline is a mess, right? So the merge happens mid-January, and then post-merge, Kai comes back and helps with Bonnie on her birthday, which is February 5th. After this, in mid-February, he goes back to Joe, needing her help to fix his magic. And that is the point where he says, oh, you're pregnant, congratulations, you're gonna have a baby. Which means that at minimum, she is pregnant starting right then in February. Personally, for me, I think it was January and he can feel it like the same timeline that like a test would, you know? So then late February, he gets sent to 1903. Joe and Rick are engaged now, moving forward with the wedding timeline. Cut to the canon date of the Red Wedding, which is June 23rd, 2013, right on top of the freaking summer solstice and a full moon. I love nothing more than the fact that Joe was like, I hate being a witch. Being a witch sucks. It's ruined my life. And then she does shit like that. I'm like, you had so many days to pick from, girl, and you still went with that one. But this would mean that Joe is again at minimum 5 to 6 months pregnant at the wedding. Obviously she dies and the babies are put into Caroline. So you're probably thinking, Sarah, what do you mean the timeline's messed up? That just means they're born in like October, right? Wrong, you idiot. Their birthday is March 15th, 2014. Let that sink on in, because that means that theoretically when they were taken from Joe and put into Caroline, they were reset to like the point of conception. We're going to talk about Joe getting stabbed at the wedding and the girls dying or not dying. And so if this is going to bother you, just fast forward a couple minutes. It annoys me to no end that Joe dies at all, because she has no Gemini magic in her at the time of him stabbing her. So had he not stabbed her through the spine, or had somebody given her vampire blood, or had she had vampire blood in the cup that she drinks from at the hospital earlier on in the episode, there are just so many ways that she could have either been healed or come back as a vampire. Like, it was right there. The amount of times where characters will like get hurt, be healed, and then die, and then immediately somebody's like, oh no, they had my blood in their system. And it's like, it didn't happen here. It didn't happen this time, really? How convenient that Elena didn't sneak her blood at the hospital after making a point to be like, nothing can happen to her on her wedding day. I have to make sure she's completely fine. I can't screw this up. Rick can't know that she's sick, because if Rick finds out, he'll be so worried and devastated. And you're telling me that needs to make everything perfect, Elena didn't sneak her some blood? That's what you're telling me? I don't believe you. Just imagine how crazy it would have been to see Joe either transition and wake up a vampire and realize she's lost the babies. She thinks, right? Because in this world, we could still have them put the babies into Caroline. The Gemini don't have to know there's vampire blood in Joe's system. They can still think she's gonna die. That can still play out the way you want it to play out, Julie. If you just could have thought about it a little bit longer. Double also though, you're telling me that as Gemini Coven leader, while the Gemini are around him in that moment doing the spell, that for some reason he thinks is the prison world spell, when he should definitely know that that chant is not the same. I know damn well you've been having nightmares for 18 years, baby. You know what that spell is. So he's standing there like a freaking idiot going, you're not gonna put me in a prison world? No, you're not. When they're putting the babies into Caroline's body, he should know that. He should be able to feel that magic and that spell that they're doing. More than that, he should be able to magically feel the girls and know that he didn't kill them. Because when Joshua is still Coven leader and Luke and Liv and Joe and Kai are trying to merge, he knows when Kai goes after Joe and starts merging. He knows when Luke and Kai merge and Luke loses. He is aware of the moment of Luke's death. And you're telling me that now suddenly those 5 to 6 month old babies that are in Joe's stomach, he just doesn't make sure they're gone? I just feel like if you're gonna set it up so that the Coven leader is like almighty and super, super mega powerful, they're untrickable. And it's not even his narcissism in that moment, right? Of being like, they can't get the upper hand here. I planned for everything. Clearly you didn't, because you should know about the body swapping baby spell. And you should definitely recognize that the spell they're chanting around you isn't the prison world spell, babe. Should have been written better, you know? We go into Legacies, right, with Josie and Lizzie Saltzman, who are 16. Here's the thing, right? The girls don't even really know about the merge or their history or the Coven. A lot of that happens off screen, like where Rick ends up having to tell them things about Kai to like further the plot and further their questions and stuff like that. We don't get enough of that on screen. We get basically nothing, right? Like there's not enough for me to feel even a little bit good about it. It's very annoying that so much of it is like brushed off and hidden, and then we just see like the aftermath of them talking about it, or the aftermath of them finding the Ascendant, and like knowing that it feels familiar and being aware that they made it with Bonnie. And we end up all coming to the realization at the same time that like they are the last two Gemini. They will have to merge at 22 or they will die, because if they don't like restart the Coven, they'll just self-implode and die, because the only way for the Coven to survive is if there's a leader. So the two of them have to merge and become one, and then in theory, you know, whoever's the winning twin would go on to like have kids, and then they'd repopulate the coven and everything little by little. So like I said, the merge that they do, that's not the real merge, right? That's a fake merge because, stay with me here, Josie has split her psyche into two things, and she sort of gets taken over by Dark Josie, which is like her scary alter ego of all the things about herself that she's most afraid of coming out to play all at once after she accepts dark magic into her because Kai tells her that that's the only way to get out of the prison world. Are you staying with me? That's the only way to get out of the prison world. She's gonna have to become a monster just like him. So she does it in order to save everybody, and it ends up working out and being fine. But Josie ends up stuck as Dark Josie for a little while, right? And everybody's like, she can't stay like this. Like, we need to fix her and bring regular Josie back because she's too scary. So they devise this plan where they're gonna merge Josie and Lizzie in a fake way, and Lizzie will link her life to Landon, who cannot be killed. Landon will die, Lizzie will die with him, but when Landon comes back to life, Lizzie will come back to life. So Josie will think that she won in the fake merge, but really Lizzie will not be dead at all, and it will not be real. She'll wake up again. And while Josie is like unconscious after the fake merge has happened and she thinks she's won, Hope will sneak into her mind and then dig around in her psyche and help her. It works out in the end. But wasn't that a lot? So do they ever actually merge? You may be wondering. No, bestie, they don't. Because Lizzie ends up getting turned into a heretic, so that then negates the merge, and they don't have to do it anymore because one of them is dead. And Josie gives up her magic and then leaves the school. So I don't know what happens if Josie goes forward and has kids, right? I don't know if it just restarts again. Kind of think it does. I kind of think it does. I kind of think the Gemini genes are in their magic whether they want them to be or not, and until the bloodline just stops entirely, there will be Gemini twins. Now, again, to me, this whole thing with like Lizzie becoming a heretic and it cutting off their connection and therefore stopping them from being psychic Gemini twins that are triggered by the curse, I don't know how I feel about that, right? Because I don't view the heretics as lesser witches. So to me, those bonds shouldn't break, even in death. It just shouldn't work that way. They spend a good chunk of their time on screen navigating the very codependent relationship that they have, right? Because they are so codependent on each other from the jump. And there's a lot going on individually with the two of them that then that codependency sort of amplifies, and a lot of what they do is fight over that. It doesn't surprise me that the girls end up with the same emotional control issues that the other siphons have, because from the jump in TVD, Rick and Caroline are like, let's tie their magic that's already volatile and a little dangerous to negative emotions. Let's remind them that they should only use it when they're scared or angry or in danger. That should be fine. That shouldn't have any adverse effects. If you watch my recaps, you can see me ripping into them about that because it is so annoying. I'm like, you have to know what you're doing here. Where is Aunt Bonnie and why isn't she putting her foot down? And like I said, I don't know if Jo would have done a better job, right? I'd like to hope that maybe she would have. I like to hope that maybe in another world where like they didn't all die, she would have leaned on Kai and at least been like, can you give me some advice? Like just a few things that you think I should do differently. But I think it would be just as easy for her to like get obsessed with like keeping them good and like never letting them make any mistakes and sort of smothering them, or just raising them as humans. If we go with like the TVD canon timeline pre-Red Wedding, Rick's a human, she's a witch without magic, and then she's raising siphon twins. So there's a world where she just didn't tell them about any of it. I don't think that would have worked, especially considering her husband is an occult studies professor with magical artifacts sort of just on him at all times. But I could see her maybe thinking that that would be an answer of just like, let's just pretend. Let's just pretend it never happened and we'll just make them humans. And that could have imploded too in a really fun way. I think they do a decent job of balancing Jo and Caroline, and they even do a thing where like Lizzie obviously favors Caroline and also like views Caroline as her mother, and so does Josie, right? Like Caroline is their mom, she raised them, but Josie is the one that is softer when it comes to Jo having been their bio mom. Lizzie is quick to be like, you're bio mom, that's all you are. And She softens after a little while and apologizes and everything, but initially she's like, ugh, time out, I don't want anything to do with you. Whereas Josie is like, oh my god, I've always wanted to know you, this is the best. Yeah, at the end of the day, as annoyed as I am about that whole situation, Caroline is the one that raised them, and she loves and adores them. I think she makes real stupid decisions when it comes to raising them as witches and dealing with their siphon powers. Like, her and Rick do a terrible job of that. And moving into Legacies, you just sort of have to make peace with like how awful the Caroline Rick stuff was at the end of TVD, because thankfully that's over, right? Like, he's not still trying to get with her in Legacies. That whole segment of scenes though, where she comes back in Legacies, is just like so unbelievably heartbreaking, because they have to siphon the magic off of her to basically kill her again, essentially. Like, she tells them, you know, you're not killing me. I'm not supposed to be back from the dead. And she explains that, like, she was somewhere watching them, which is so beautiful, because it does confirm that what we kind of knew at the end of TVD, where like the ghosts are still around and like keeping an eye on everybody, it's just not the other side anymore. Like, that's gone. And I like to imagine they just have a harder time communicating now, but they're still out and about floating around. And Jo confirms that. She says that wherever she was at peace and she could watch them whenever she wanted. And so she had been watching them grow and turn into young women. And it's just like, my heart, I can't take it. So with Lizzie specifically, they try to choke down our throats this idea that she is the most like Kai, right? And I inherently disagree with that on multiple levels. The least of which is that Lizzie Saltzman is a 16-year-old girl with bipolar disorder. He is a grown man suffering from trauma-induced sociopathy. They are not the same thing. They try to do this really annoying thing where they mark her as bipolar, right? And then in her school file, they sort of imply that maybe that's what was wrong with Kai all along. Maybe siphons are just always bipolar, and we should just expect that of them because they're dangerous and that's how they always act. Sorry, walk that back. What? Hate that more than I can say. Hate that they try to make it a thing that like defines them. No, I don't play that game. No, thank you. He is also put into a villain role, right? Like, we're not supposed to like him. We're supposed to think he's scary. We're supposed to be afraid of him. Lizzie is a young girl. She is never the villain. She is never the bad guy. She does things that kind of suck. So do all the other ones. They all make mistakes across the board in the show. She is never the villain, but people love to see her do something that looks similar to him and go, see, she's crazy. She's crazy, just like her uncle. And like, let me hold your hand when I say this. That is so harmful, not to mention hurtful, right? Just knock that off, please. But I think putting such a heavy emphasis on her being like Kai completely negates the fact that she's Caroline's daughter. Did we all just forget that the beginning of the show, Caroline is like a neurotic control freak? That is what everybody calls her. That's what she calls herself. Remember the plan that she had for Miss Mystic Falls? The way she planned prom? The reaction she had when Rebecca took over prom? Any little thing goes wrong in Caroline's carefully crafted circle of control, she's losing her mind. She's gonna be mean, she's gonna be petty. All these things that we see Lizzie do, and it's like, I think I know where she got it from, and I don't think it was him, my guy. Being a type A control freak is literally what makes everybody call her a good vampire later on. And so if you put all that energy into Lizzie, even without a bipolar diagnosis, like, her powers are volatile, that's gonna be hard for her. She's gonna deal with control issues. One of my lovely mutuals on Tumblr talked about how they like feel like Lizzie would have wanted to be a vampire because Caroline was a vampire. And I couldn't agree more. Like, I think that makes perfect sense, where if it all broke down to just like, we need to break the merge and therefore one of you has to turn into a heretic because you can both do it, and so it won't be harmful to either one of you, pick one, who wants to do it? Lizzie would do it because she idolizes Caroline. Like I said, she's the one that really 100% views her as their mother. I think she thinks Caroline is so cool, and I feel like if she had the opportunity to be more like her, why wouldn't she want to do that? Because in TVD lore, like, witches hate vampires, right? They hate them. And we kind of know that across the board until we get to people like Bonnie and Jo who seem to have like different opinions on things. But I feel like that just intensifies the fact that Lizzie would be okay with it. Like, she wouldn't view it as a bad thing. She would just be like, I get to do this and stop the merge from happening so I don't have to hurt Josie and she doesn't have to hurt me, and I get to be like Mom, sign me up. Don't get me wrong too though, Lizzie's very volatile, right? She's very mean when she wants to be. She just stays giving into her impulses. She's also desperate for somebody to love her, but she has bad taste in men. Remember him? She even describes herself as being awful and needy in one of her fights with Josie, but I think that that just speaks to how insecure she is. And she tends to go after people like this instead of the people that maybe have her best interest in heart. And if that doesn't scream Liv Parker to you, I don't know what does. When Joe shows up, right, Lizzie is so mean to her. So unbelievably mean to her, to the point where she ends up breaking down and like crying and being like, Mom, I'm so sorry, I was horrible to you. And Joe is like, oh, Lizzie, it's okay. You have such a big heart. It's all right to let people see it every once in a while. And it's like, that's Liv. Like, you're talking about Liv. I would almost say if you're just looking at the Parker clan, she's way more like Liv than she is Kai. Like, she really struggles out loud in a way that Josie does internally, right? And so I think people are quick to like judge Lizzie and view her as this like unstable, scary, mean girl. And that just really simplifies her down into stuff that I don't like. She's not my favorite twin, right? I like Josie more too, but there are things about her that I love. I think she's funny. I think she does care in her own ways. She just, again, struggles in a way that Josie doesn't to express that. And a lot of times it comes out in this like very intense, overbearing, or like mean way that I think speaks to Caroline. Like, how many times did Caroline say something awful in the middle of like a tense scene and Elena and Bonnie are like, girl. Also, like, Lizzie has this whole internal arc of like knowing she's the broken twin. Like, that's how she thinks of herself, right? She thinks she's like the defective broken twin, not unlike Kai, right? But in her mind, that's why she's gonna lose. She's like, I should lose. I'm not good enough to win. I don't deserve to win. Josie's gonna win because she's better than me. And it's real fricked up when you think about it. Like, she feels like she's so unstable and broken internally herself that like nothing can be done to fix her, and she should just lose the merge and Josie should just take over because that would be better. And then you got my girl over here who canonically spends most of her arc fighting her internal darkness because she is so afraid of ending up like Kai and the other heretics. Like, that is her whole thing, is that she knows she has a draw to darker magic, she knows she has a draw to power, and she is terrified of it. Not unlike all the things I said about Joe, being like, I don't want to be like Kai. Josie feels the same way. She's like, if I'm not careful, I will go right down that road. I can feel it inside of me. It's like a pull that I can't deny, and I have to fight every instinct in my body to stop myself from being that way. And it's like, baby girl, the fact that you feel like that is already drawing a dividing line, okay? You're good. You don't need to be as worried as you are, but she's 16 and she's terrified and he's awful. He tricks the shit out of her and then she tricks the shit out of him, and then that gets even worse for her because it opens the door for him to be like, you know what? I'm kind of proud. You're kind of proving my point that you are like me. And it's just like, damn. But she gets so overrun with this fear, right, that when the dark magic goes into her, her mind essentially splits, and like regular Josie is like hiding in her subconscious while dark Josie just takes over and runs a freaking muck. She is so scared of her nature and what may or may not happen and the possibilities of the future and like what she needs to do that she ends up giving up her magic just like Joe, and then leaving it behind, not even taking it with her, right? She leaves it behind and then leaves the school to just go off on her own, just like Joe did. And at the same time that she's the twin that like wants power and wants to be in control and is drawn to the dark side of things, she's also the one that like fades into the background to let Lizzie outshine her. She spends so much of her time making herself smaller. She's very quiet in the beginning, especially compared to Lizzie, right? Who, like I said, deals with things out loud. She's the one that sort of like talks everybody down from being really mean to Lizzie, keeps them from like hating her, you know, explains for her and like smooths over situations where Lizzie goes off the handle. This whole thing with like her making herself smaller for Lizzie gets really ugly though when they start fighting in the way that like only sisters can, right? Because Lizzie knows this and she just rubs it in her face and is like, you let them hate me because it's easier than them actually getting to know you and hating you too, right? you're afraid of yourself, and so you stay small behind me so that I can get the brunt of everything. In that moment, then they both like frantically siphon something and then attack each other, and Josie wins because she is absolutely the stronger twin. There is not even like a single thread of doubt that Josie Saltzman is the stronger twin. Like, she just is. Don't even start arguing because you're wrong. And she is like well liked, you know, they're both popular. Josie has more relationships than Lizzie because Lizzie sort of like ping pongs around and doesn't settle, and Josie gets like deeply attached to people in a different way. The triangle between like Hope Michelson and the Saltzman twins should probably be its own video, you know, and I think I'm just gonna leave you with I like Josie and Hope infinitely more. And then there's like this weird pushback where like anytime Josie does do anything to like stand up for herself or like try to put Lizzie in her place, then people will be like, hey, your sister's crazy, be nice to her. And again, that's harmful. Like, you can't. And now one thing I have mixed feelings on is this goodbye scene with Josie and Lizzie on the bus. On one hand, I love it. It's so emotionally charged and really, really heartbreaking. There's also undertones of like the actresses saying goodbye because this is when Josie's actress was like leaving the show. But on the other hand, I don't like the implication that Lizzie turning into a heretic like severs their twin bond, because what we're essentially supposed to believe is happening is like while Lizzie is dead, Josie can see her, and like it's almost like ghost spirit Lizzie is visiting her on the bus and they're having this goodbye moment together, because Josie says out loud like, I couldn't feel you anymore, meaning that like Lizzie had died and Josie couldn't feel her, and Lizzie says, oh, I know, I couldn't feel you either. But now they're having this like mystical communication moment and they seem to be okay. This is sort of a good thing because it implies that siphons are witches, and turning into heretics, half vampires, strips them fully of their witch magic, which would be what the Gemini twin bond falls under. And then we're left with vampire body, siphon power still works to drain just themselves. And on one hand, that's great because it proves my point that siphons are innately witches and you people just suck and really need to get over your biases. But then at the same time, I'm like, regular twins, like regular real life twins, have bonds that can't be broken. And you're gonna tell me that an overpowered magical version of this thing, right, breaks in death? I just don't believe you. I'm sorry. It just doesn't track for me. I don't agree with that. I have to just take it with a grain of salt and be like, once Lizzie wakes up in her heretic body, their bond might be different now. It might be a little weaker. It might not be truly psychic anymore. It's still there. I just have to believe that for my own well-being, you know? But where we're left at that point is that the curse is theoretically broken. Lizzie's a heretic, so her and Valerie don't count anymore. Josie is the only remaining, like, Gemini witch, but she doesn't have her magic. She gave it up. What happens if Josie grows up and has kids? Who's to freaking say, people? We will never know. Oh my God, can't believe we're done. We're done. We're done for now. Will I pop in during editing? Maybe. Probably. I think at this point I've touched on every little thing that I wanted to touch on. I'm not sure how I could talk for longer. This video is just an insane amount of information at once. Thank you so much for being here with me through it. I hope you enjoyed. If it wasn't obvious, so much has gone into making this video. Editing wise, I've had so much fun. Like I'm sitting here, look at the smile on my face. I can't wait to go back into my office and edit what I filmed today, okay? I'm so excited. But it has taken multiple days and a lot of hours. So if you're having fun and if you enjoyed it, please like, please subscribe, please share it with your friends, okay? Bring them over here, tell them I'm insane and all I do is talk about TVD. Maybe they want to do that with me, who knows? As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are, and I will see you so soon. Have a good one. Bye!